And welcome to our Pacific Northwest Regional Training event. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our event. I think you'll find it beneficial and hopefully you'll walk away with learning new items that you can use in your daily work here. I would like us all to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll start now. And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And so I want to make you aware that the presentations and the recording of the training event will be available by the beginning of next week. We will also, on the presentations, we're going to ask you we're not going to answer these questions until at the end of the presentation. And if for some reason we do not answer all these questions, the unanswered questions, we will have the presenters answer them and they will send it to the council, and then we will send it when you get your link to the handbook for the desk guide for the professional desk, our small business professional desk guide. And then we'll also send you your certificate of attendance. We also are going to have our Q&A each day. So that way, if you have questions as a SBLO or as a government agency, you will be able to ask those, and we have some great people to answer those questions for you. I'm now going to hand this over to Kay Baltz. She's our chairman of the DoD Pacific Northwest Regional Council Advocacy, and she will be our host for the next 2 days. Thank you, Kay, for taking over, and thank you for your help with this.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Melinda. I want to first off thank everyone for participating today and for joining us. We've got a wonderful plan for your educational enjoyment. Special thanks goes out to the Native PTAC, Vanessa and Jeremy. Thank you so much for supporting this event and providing this platform. Also, thank you to our board. Let's see, we've got Dave Waltz, Mike Gilbert, Melinda, and Jackie. Very, very key people. We also have Jim Niles, but I'm not sure if he's able to join us today. So thank you very much to everyone's help and support as we do this. Okay, now rolling into, let's see, I don't have to go through the introduction information of where the bathrooms are. We should all know where those are. Anything else? We should know where our fire exits are. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we are very, very fortunate today in that we have Mr. Jim Nagle joining us to share on the new administration, what to expect with the small business program. Let me tell you a little about Mr. Nagle first. He is a nationally recognized attorney and thought leader in government contract law. He is sought out for his knowledge and counsel. He's an expert witness, arbitrator, mediator, and he's sought by both the government and the federal contractors. He has unrivaled experience working on supplies, services, international major systems, and construction contracts. However, he had a life prior to this. He served as a chief of the Logistics and Contract Law Branch of the Department of Army staff and as a trial team chief in the Army's Contract Appeals Division. He is the author of 6 books on federal contracting, including The History of Federal Contracting, and more than 100 articles that have been published. He received his Federal Bar Foundation Award for distinguished accomplishments in the study of procurement law. Now, I met Mr. Nagel at an NCMA meeting in Western Washington State. He's been an active member and supporter of the National Contract Management Association for years. It is with great honor and a pleasure to welcome Mr. Nagel. Please join me in opening it.
Well, thank you very much, Kay. That was delightful. I don't know where you got the unrivaled part. Well, I enjoyed hearing it, but well, what we're going to talk about is, as you can see on the slide there, President Biden's new directions for government contractors. Now, some of the things I'm going to say apply only to small businesses, but a lot of the other things I'll say apply to all contractors, including small businesses. So small businesses have to be aware of it, such things as new labor rules coming, new Buy American Act rules coming, okay? So with that, Jeremy, if you could go to the next slide. We've been hit with an avalanche of new rules since January 20th. Now, to one extent, changes are routine, okay? Every time we get a new occupant of the White House, we get changes, especially if it's a new political party. What's made this last 60 days or 62 days, whatever it is, so hectic is one, the pandemic. And because of the impetus that's been applying to government contracting and government relations, but also we're seeing executive orders and proclamations at an unprecedented pace. We've never seen these before. Now, the two major categories of changes that we're seeing, first, more money in projects. Not only is there not going to be any retreat from the expenditures of 500 million plus in federal contracting, but those numbers are almost appearing quaint in terms of the enactments already coming out of Congress and the ones that are planned. And I'm going to talk about the influx of cash that is coming is truly unprecedented and unrivaled. You would have to go back to World War II to get a real appreciation of the dollar amounts that are coming. And those dollar amounts are changing policies and regulations. And I'll be talking an awful lot about that. Now, it's not going to affect just contracts. It's going to affect grants to a very great extent. And I'll mention a lot of that. And it's also going to affect flow down clauses. Don't think that because, well, I don't contract directly with the federal government. I'm a third tier subcontractor, so I don't have to worry about all of this other stuff. Think again, people. I mean, all of this is going to flow down. Now, most of the change are going to appear once they are fully implemented in the federal acquisition regulation, the FAR, in the socioeconomic areas from 19 through 25 are the big areas. So I'll try to break down my talk on that. There will be some other things that are changing. The cybersecurity rules are going to be changing in FAR Part 4, those of you who are familiar with that. So be aware of that. Next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, infrastructure. That first bullet there, President Biden expected to submit a $1 trillion infrastructure proposal shortly. I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide, or next one or two slide out there, okay? But what I want to emphasize on this slide is this is not your parents' idea of infrastructure. When I first got involved in government contracting, when you talked about infrastructure, you were talking roads, bridges, a few dams. This is much broader than that. Airports, waterfronts, levees, clean air, clean water, clean drinking, school construction, broadband. Okay, the grid, the electric grid is very much in the target of this new infrastructure requirement. One thing it's not going to contain is more funding for President Trump's border wall. President Biden, right on the first day, January 20th, after he had taken the oath of office, issued a proclamation about the border wall. He stopped it. He didn't use the word stop. He used the word paused. Now, as many of you know, pause is not a word we see it's not a technical phrase in government contracting. So what contract officers did is they issued suspension of work orders to those contractors. Now, as you all probably know, under a suspension of work, the government, has to pay damages, on that. I say damages loosely. The government is incurring about $6 million each day on delay cost. Now, they don't have to pay profit on that under the clause, the suspension of work clause, until it becomes unreasonable. Now, unreasonable is not defined in the FAR, but the border wall is stopped. In all likelihood, eventually it will be terminated for convenience, but right now it is just stopped. That will not be, as far as we can tell right now, part of the infrastructure project. Now, the clean, yes, as far as I know, the slides will be available. I think Melinda mentioned that. Clean energy is going to be a hallmark phrase of this administration. Okay, next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, the new administration has already passed the first hurdle. Remember March 10th, $1.9 trillion, okay? $1.9 trillion. Remember when President Obama came in, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, 2009, that was for $890 billion, and we thought that was phenomenal. This is over twice that, okay? And that's just the first installment. Now take a look at what's in there. $130 billion for elementary and high schools, $350 billion in emergency assistance to state and local governments who have been so hard pressed by that. So that's the tip of the iceberg. But at $1.9 trillion, that's a heck of a tip of an iceberg. And I'll keep coming back to that. Now, President Biden was supposed to, at his State of Union address, which was scheduled for February 24th, to talk about Build Back Better, his plan. The State of the Union has been pushed back, so we'll get more details on that later. But I think I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Well, let me talk about it now. Apparently, about 3 or 4 days ago, the president was briefed on his second phase structure. That is another $3 trillion in relief aid. Okay, it hasn't been proposed to Congress yet, but it is coming. $3 trillion, including $1.3 trillion specifically for infrastructure. Now, again, this is in addition to the $1.9 trillion. So there is going to be a huge amount that is coming. Many of that, both already enacted and coming, is earmarked for small businesses. Now, those of you who are small businesses, you cannot just Google or word search the new statutes and just look at small business, because sometimes it will be more than that. For example, the act that was passed includes $26.8 billion that's going to the states specifically for aid to restaurants that have been hammered by the pandemic. Now, virtually all of those restaurants are small businesses, but you're not going to see the word small businesses in the act. So you'll have to do a little more research rather than just Googling small business in there. Okay? But there is an awful lot that is coming specifically earmarked for small business. And I'll come back to that again. Next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, if you look at the topic there, government contracts, research and development, R&D. If you want to look at the reason for this slide and this impetus, it is one word: competition. In 2020, for the first time, China overtook the United States in research and development. Okay? In 1964, 2% of our national GDP went for R&D, and it has steadily declined since then. And as you all know, research and development is critical. That is what keeps us ahead of the curve, and we're falling further and further behind on that. So the Biden administration has proposed $300 billion investment in an R&D program, the Innovate in America, and take a look at what I have bolded there, on a scale well beyond the Apollo program. Now, most of you are probably too young to remember the Apollo program, but that was in the 1960s and early 70s, basically to put people on the moon. Okay? It was an enormous project. We had the nation, the world generated tremendous benefits from that. So this is the scale we're talking about. Now, notice it says, including advanced industries like cutting edge telecommunications and artificial intelligence and clean vehicles. Okay, and I'll talk more about that, but I want to emphasize the word including. It's not limited to those, okay? Now, the second bullet and the third bullet, there's a bit of a problem there, okay? Right now, the Biden plan, as much as we've seen it on R&D, is exceeding to government agency demands that they get broader intellectual property rights in matters arising in government contract, especially the Defense Department. The Defense Department is proposing new rules in the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulatory Supplement, that would give DoD more ownership. Okay. Now, IP rights have always been a problem in government contracting, especially because it's so complicated. You have rules for the Defense Department, you have rules for the civilian agencies, you have rules for commercial items. The administration is going to have to walk very gingerly on that. As Kay mentioned, I wrote a history of government contracting, and I came to one obvious thought. The United States government has enormous contracting power once someone signs the contract. If they don't sign the contract, if they walk away from the contract, the government has no contracting power. If there is one thing that will make a contractor walk away from a government contract, it is the fear that they will lose their intellectual property. So the administration is going to have to walk a fine line on that in terms of making the agencies happy. We paid for this. We want to have ownership to that, or we'll give you rights in the data, but we want to be able to use this on other areas. It is a minefield, and it's a bit of a problem. Now, that last bullet I have there, other transaction agreements, if you're not familiar with that, this is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Okay, it's a monster. It's 2,000 pages. Okay, it is so complicated, as all of you know, that very often when the government buys something, by the time it's delivered, it's antiquated. Okay, so Congress in the last few years has expanded the ability of agencies to use other transaction authority, OTAs. Okay? DoD is certainly using Energy Department, NASA, Homeland Security, and a variety of other agencies now. That basically gives the government the right to go, okay, we're going to award this OTA, forget about the FAR, unless to the extent we specifically incorporated sections therein. Okay. So that is something that many agencies are using now for their R&D and their prototype contracts. And the SBIR and the STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer Program, that is going to be supersized, for lack of a better expression. Right now, there are only 11 agencies. Someone's saying they have a lot of audio echo on this presentation. I'm not hearing that. I don't know what it is, what would be causing it. There are only 11 agencies that have an SBIR program. There are only 5 that have an STTR program. The Biden administration plans to supersize that, spread that throughout the federal government. But that is the impetus. If you wonder why the government is doing this, it's because the government is looking behind its shoulder primarily at China now. Okay. Next slide, please, Jeremy. By the way, if you're having audio problems, if you have two computers on there, sometimes that causes that. Now, I did want to add this slide. Obviously, we're talking about numbers, trillions of dollars that we're just not used to talking about. If you're talking about the appropriation of funds, Congress must take the lead on that. It's not something the White House can do. Now, there are very thin Democratic majorities in both houses. Okay, it's dead even in the Senate. It's a very thin majority in the House. Now they won the first issue, the Democrats did on March 10th, but with all the other, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, fiscally conservative members of Congress, not just Republicans, are going, well, wait a minute now, wait a minute. Our tax revenues are going to be down because of the pandemic. Our expenditures have risen substantially. Maybe we have to throttle back on that. So everyone recognizes there's got to be help from the pandemic, relief from the pandemic. But even though I'm going to say the plan is 3 trillion here, 1.9 trillion here, they may be throttled back, but we're probably not going to go back anytime soon to the a few $100 billion for something like that. Okay, next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, the general categories of contracting changes. First, a lot of the Trump policies will continue. Now, that shocks a lot of people. And now there are certainly some things that, well, they're gone, okay? But there are others, they were good ideas. And President Biden has already signaled that he will continue those. And I'm going to emphasize some of those. Now, otherwise, there are some U-turns from some of Trump's policies. For example, President Biden issued Executive Order 14,006. President Trump had basically private prisons where the prison would be built and run by private corporations. President Biden has put a stop to that. Those of you who may remember A76, where a government workforce that may have done the work for decades would now have to compete in a solicitation with industry. And if industry won, the government workforce would be reassigned to other jobs. I don't expect to see A76 back in a Biden administration. It has never been a favored child of any Democratic administration. So I don't think that's coming back. What we are seeing is an incredibly aggressive use of executive orders. President Biden has issued over 34 in the first 50 days, and they're coming out every other day, it seems like, plus proclamations, which are a little less binding than executive orders. For example, I give a few examples there. The Made in All of America, that deals with the Buy American Act, domestic preference. The executive order on a sustainable public health supply chain, specifically dealing with our ability to respond to crises such as the pandemic, or the one on supply chains. I'm going to talk more about supply chains later on in this talk. But basically, the Biden administration has been talking about the things I emphasized in the last bullet: labor and pay issues, domestic preferences, cybersecurity and supply chain, infrastructure, clean energy, COVID-19, the vaccine distribution, and the DPA, the Defense Production Act, that I'm going to talk about in more detail on the next slide, which we'll go to now, Jeremy. Okay, now, oh, I forgot about this slide. I put together this slide just to give you a handy reference for some, not all. As I said, there's like 54 of them now. Executive orders affecting contractors. So the first one, 14,008, that deals with the climate crisis. Okay. The new administration is going to be very environmentally sensitive and aggressive. 1406, reforming our incarceration system. I mentioned that. 14005, Buy American Act, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to give you a reference to that. Next slide, please. Now, some of the Trump policies, and there will be others that are likely to stay. If you remember, President Trump disliked NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. He replaced that with the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement. That is unlikely to be rolled back because it had tremendous bipartisan support when it was passed. So that's staying. The opportunity zones were created by his tax legislation in 2017. He created opportunity zones which gave very favorable capital gains treatment to people who invested in low income areas, inner city areas. That's been tremendously successful. That's not going to go away anytime soon. Then the Defense Production Act. It's the Defense Production Act of 1950, so it's been around for 70 years now. It came out with the start of the Korean War. None of you remember that. Basically, it allows the government to act as a traffic cop, okay? Say Melinda is a steel mill, okay? And Sam and Kay, Sam is General Motors, Kay is Ford. So they buy all their steel from her. And they've been good customers for decades. She doesn't want to lose them. And they had their orders in for a long time. But then all at once, the government has awarded a tank manufacturing contract to Jeremy. If the government gives Jeremy's contract a specific rating on the Defense Production Act, Jeremy gets to cut into the head of the line. Melinda, before you sell steel to Sam or Kay or Vanessa or anybody else, you got to sell it to me. Oh, and by the way, the act will, protect you against being sued by them for delayed damages or so. Now, you might think, well, that's an act doesn't really apply anymore. Well, think again. It's been used quite a lot in the Trump administration and the Biden administration. It was used by the Trump administration an awful lot in Operation Warp Speed to hasten the development of the vaccine. President Biden has already used it to hasten the distribution of the vaccine. So that is an act, it's going to be around for a while. It gives the federal government the needed ability to speed up things. And any of you who were involved in Operation Warp Speed, you're familiar with its power. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, when a new president takes office, his predecessor's executive orders are not automatically revoked. For example, the executive order that we all work under on equal employment was issued by President Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. So until it is specifically revoked by the new president, the old president's executive orders remain. For example, President Trump had kept some of President Obama's executive orders. The ones on minimum wage and sick leave, they are still valid. They are implemented in FAR Part 22 on labor. Now, some of President Obama's executive orders were revoked, and I want to emphasize two of them now that are very likely to come back. The first one, Executive Order 13495, non-displacement of qualified workers under service contract. This has sort of a checkered past. President Clinton had issued it, giving essentially a right of first refusal to service workers. So basically, if a new contractor comes in and wants to replace people before they can hire new service workers, they would have to go to the previous contractor's workers and offer the job to them first. President Clinton had come out with it first. President Bush revoked it within 3 weeks of taking office. President Obama reinstated it essentially within 3 weeks of taking office. President Trump eventually revoked it, and it will almost certainly come back under President Biden, probably with some tweaking, but it's going to come back. Now, the next one, some of you may remember this. President Obama had issued the Fair Pay and Safe Workplaces Executive Order. It was supposed to begin being phased in on October 25th, 2016. It never went into effect. The day before it was supposed to go in, a federal judge in Texas enjoined it. There were three problems with it. Now, the federal judge didn't have problems with all three of these, but Congress did. And when President Trump came in, this executive order was thrown out. The first one on transparency of pay, it required that when a federal contractor employee gets his or her paycheck, it had to have more information than many of them do now. The rate of pay, the number of hours worked, the number of regular hours worked, the number of overtime worked, the gross pay, all of the deductions, and whether the individual was an employee of the contractor or an independent contractor. Okay. Secondly, there was an accountability rule. President Obama said, if you have been found liable or been alleged to have violated any of the Labor Standards Act, Davis-Bacon, Service Contract Act, Walsh-Healy, or engaged in sexual harassment, you had to disclose that with your proposal for a new contract. Now, the federal judge had a great deal of problem with that. Now, wait a minute. I can understand why you want to do that if you've been found liable in court for that, found guilty in court for that. But why did you have to disclose that if there's just been an allegation? Okay, so that was one of the problems there. Another thing the executive order did, many contractors, when they hire employees as a condition of the employment contract, as a clause in the contract, the employee had to agree that if I want to allege sexual harassment against a supervisor, coworker, what have you, I cannot go right to court. I've got to go to arbitration on that. President Obama's executive order had prohibited those. That also was struck down. That is very likely to come back in one form or another. Okay. Next slide, Jeremy. Now, small business. Okay. Small businesses are covered at Part 19 of the FAR. As you all probably know, the plan is there's $400 billion in a small business spending plan. That's a huge amount. Remember, prior to this, the federal government, in large and small businesses would only spend a little bit more than $500 billion. So it's a large amount. By the way, there's an awful lot of other money going to be going to small businesses. What's proposed, the $31 billion to go directly to small businesses in grants, another $75 billion to go to to financing small businesses, and they want to leverage that to about $175 billion for small businesses by partnering with financial institutions. So there's going to be an awful lot earmarked for small businesses. Now, the Biden administration has also said it intends to triple the federal government's contracting goal for small disadvantaged business. Right now, it's 5%. By 2025, they want to triple that to 15%. Now, why are they waiting so long to do that? Remember, that's the goal for the entire federal government. For some agencies or some offices within the federal government, 15% might be too low. Okay, they can do a lot better than that. For others, it might be too high. They're going to be doomed to fail. For example, the Army. The Army has a tank automotive command. There's not a whole lot of small disadvantaged businesses who build tanks, but then they've got other offices, electronics command. That 15% might be too low. So they've got to factor in the planning to come up with the goals for all the individual elements of the agencies. Okay. Now, the Biden administration has also said we're going to have more audits to make sure that people aren't abusing the process, that you really are a small business, that you really operated as a small and disadvantaged, that you're really a woman-owned small business or something like that. There will certainly be a greater effort on that, but they're going to run into personnel restraints. As to how many people the government can hire to check that. One other thing the administration has promised, they're going to put more restraints on bundled contracts. Now, I give the FAR site there for bundled contracts. Now, as many of you know, bundling happened a couple of decades ago. The federal government, say in a particular military installation, where we award a small business contract for lawn mowing, another small business contract for janitorial services, another small business contract for trash removal, another one for window washing. And eventually the federal government decided, well, shoot, why then, rather than award and administer 10 to 15 different contracts, we'll bundle them all together into one large contract. And we'll just award and administer one contract. The problem was that when they bundled them all together, the resulting contract was too big for a small business. Now, the small business community didn't like that. So the FAR, driven by Congress, put some requirements in there, set forth in FAR 7.107 as to what the federal government had to conclude before it can do that. the Biden administration has promised they will add more restraints to that. Now, the details are still left to be decided, but that should be coming. What I did want to emphasize in that last bullet, as many of you know, in the last year and a half of the Trump administration, the Small Business Administration came out with a lot of small business rules, hub zones, women-owned small business, ending self-certification for that, increasing the thresholds or the dollar amounts for small business or small disadvantaged business. I have not seen any indication that these are going to be, that those rules are going to be done away with. They were not philosophic objections to small business. They were basically designed to eliminate fraud with other than a woman-owned small business falsely claiming to be a woman-owned small business, for example, simplifying the process, correcting some loopholes, or updating some dollar amount. So I don't expect those to change. And I don't want to talk any more about them because I know you've got small business specialists who will be talking about that. So I don't want to steal their thunder, but I just wanted to give you that overview of that. Next slide, please. Now, FAR Part 22, labor. This traditionally has been the biggest battleground between Republicans and Democratic administrations, labor. Now, for that first bullet there, as you may remember, President Trump had issued that executive order 13950, combating race and sex stereotyping. It was specifically against, quote, critical race theory, where the view of the Trump administration was that, my gosh, you're focusing everything on race, and you're, quote, scapegoating white people. There's no other way to say it. That was the purpose, really, of the executive order. It was not an issue of whether this was going to be revoked by President Biden. The only issue was whether it would be days or hours, and it was hours. I mean, basically right on January 20th, he revoked that executive order. He has issued 2 new executive orders now. The numbers are there, that have imposed a requirement on federal contractors for racial equity, and wanted to make sure that they remove systemic barriers to underserved communities, gender orientation, and gender identity. So those are no longer valid bases to discriminate if there was any doubt under the Trump administration. Now, the third bullet, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. That is an office of the Labor Department. As you know, it's been in existence for quite some time. It will undoubtedly be more active in a Biden administration, as it always is in a Democratic administration. The new OFCCP administrator has, in her career, had a great emphasis on pay equity, especially, but not exclusively, especially between men and women. So if you are a contractor, you had better be prepared to explain, well, this is why this male is getting paid more than this woman. He has more seniority, has more duties or something like that. Because if you're not able to adequately explain that, you know, OFCCP is going to have a problem with you. Also, it is very likely that a Trump administration policy will be revoked. Some of you may remember that the Trump administration had put in regulations allowing exemptions from certain religious organizations. Well, we're a Catholic hospital. We don't want to do those abortions. We don't want to honor same-sex marriages or something like that. The indication is that those exemptions will be revoked. Okay. That next bullet, the $15 minimum wage. Now, I want to make sure no one is confused by this. There are 2 things that are contemplated. One is a statute that will raise the federal minimum wage for everybody, whether they are a government contractor or not, to $15 an hour. Now, there's been some pushback on that, especially from the Congressional Budget Office. The Congressional Budget Office about a month ago came out with a study basically saying, yes, that would lift, I think, 900,000 people out of poverty, but it would result in 1.4 million job losses, and it would be pretty inflationary. But that would dealt with the proposed statute for everybody in the in the United States getting a $15 minimum wage. What this fourth bullet there talks about is a promised executive order that would deal only with federal contractors. I think the federal minimum wage for contractors right now, as of January 1st, is $10.95 an hour. This will take it to $15 an hour. President Biden had promised that within 100 days of taking office. He's already, as of today, I think on his 63rd or 64th day. Okay, so that we might be seeing that fairly shortly. Democratic administrations are always much more pro-union. So we will undoubtedly see more project labor agreements now. Project labor agreements are covered under subpart 22.5 of the FAR. They're listed there. They are agreements before you start a typically major construction contract, where the federal government will enter into agreements with the local labor organizations, AFL-CIO, what have you, as to terms and conditions for the people who will be working on this major project. So that will undoubtedly increase. There will be more emphasis on that. Next slide, please, Jeremy. The Democratic administration will also be behind the Protect the Right to Organize Act. Now, that has been proposed by President Patty Murray here in Washington State, and by many others. It's a very pro-union. It's unclear whether it will pass, because a lot of states of the union are not necessarily pro-union, but that should be on your radar scope, depending on where you are located. Now, that last bullet. Biden administration will undoubtedly make it easier for workers who are not U.S. citizens to be legally employed. Okay. Now, the quote I have there comes from an official of the Associated General Contractors Construction Trade Association. Over 100,000 workers in the construction industry that are either in the DACA program or TPS. But I want to emphasize that does not apply only to construction. A lot of services workers, a lot of supply workers, or would-be workers are not U.S. citizens. It will be easier for them to be employed in the Biden administration, undoubtedly. Okay. Next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, again, remember what I said. Most of the changes will be in the socioeconomic area. So we've talked about FAR Part 19 on small business. 20 and 21 are reserved under FAR. 22 is labor standards. 23 is environment, energy, and safety. The Biden administration is going to be more environmentally aggressive. Okay, now that executive order 14,008 that deals with addressing the climate crisis domestically and overseas. So it's going to be very aggressive, and it is sensitive. Okay, now President Biden has already promised that he will phase out the approximately 600,000 federal gas-driven vehicles. Now, this does not include tactical military vehicles, tanks, self-propelled howitzers, or something like that. But the GSA fleet, things like that, they will be phased out. Now, they've got to be phased out. It's going to take time, and it would be foolish for the government just to scrap brand new cars or something like that. But they're going to be phased out. Okay? The Keystone Pipeline has already been stopped. So FAR Part 23 under a Biden administration will be more aggressive, more ubiquitous than in a Trump administration. That second bullet, I want to emphasize this. We saw tepid steps in that during the Obama administration. It'll probably be much more pronounced here. I think that during the next 4 years, when you propose on a federal contract, in addition to be evaluated on your technical merit, your management, your past performance, you'll also be evaluated on the size of your carbon footprint. How good a steward are you of the environment? Okay, so be prepared for that. Now, I'm sure they won't come out with an executive order and say, okay, tomorrow you've got to do this. It'll be phased in, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. Not just how well you're going to perform this contract, but what is your carbon footprint today before you start performing that contract? Now, that last bullet there, Executive Order 13991, protecting the federal workforce and requiring mask wearing, that is the Biden executive order that basically says when you're working on federal lands or in federal office buildings, things like that, you've got to wear masks, you've got to maintain social distancing, things like that. It would not surprise me at all if before the end of this calendar year, contractors doing work on federal property will have to certify that their workers are vaccinated. Okay, so be aware of that if you're a contractor. Now, depending on how that is done, you may not get any more money for that. Certainly, if a contracting officer issues a change order, you will. But many of you contractors who are working in government facilities, and I will take the military as a prime example, but it's not exclusive. Somewhere in your existing contract, you have already agreed to that you will comply with all requirements of the installation commander regarding access to the facility. And if the installation commander decides, no, I want vaccinated people on there, you may be stuck. There was a case out of an Air Force base in Montana within the last 2 or 3 years, Garco Construction, as I recall. After the contract had been awarded, a new base commander, she decided, I don't want people with criminal records are coming on my base. So that caused a bit of a problem for Garco, and they sued because it delayed them, cost them more money, and the judges said it's a sovereign act. It was not an unreasonable act for the installation commander. So be aware of that. Okay? Next slide, please, Jeremy. I skipped FAR Part 24 because that's Freedom of Information Act, Privacy Act. There's no indication that the Biden administration is going to make tremendous changes there or any changes that I've heard of. Part 25, basically domestic preference, Buy America Act, Buy American Act, all of those other items. Here again, there is going to be a continuation of the Trump policies, okay? President Trump was tremendously active. He's probably been the most active president on Buy American since Eisenhower. He had issued 3 different executive orders. You'll see some of them there, and I'll talk more of the details about that. But let me explain in a nutshell why President Trump and President Biden are very worried about this. In World War II, we were the great arsenal of democracy. We just outproduced the Axis powers. We could not replicate that today. And that's not just me talking, that's a pretty acknowledged fact. So we've got to get back to that area, okay? President Biden has already continued that changes, his executive order 14,005. You have the sites for that now. Now, some of those sub-bullets there. It's not that President Trump had changed too many of the rules. He changed some of them, but basically he just enforced the rules. Okay, he made it much more difficult to get waivers. Okay, as some of you older hands will remember, it used to be that, okay, I'm the contracting officer. I need 800 waivers on this contract, and a lot of those would be granted. Maybe all of those would be granted. Much more difficult now. President Biden is continuing that, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. It's got to go up to a higher level to get that approval, and there is going to be a website, publicly available website. Okay, I'm a contracting officer for the Interior Department. I've got a waiver request for this item because it's not made in the United States at all, or it's not a reasonable quality or quantity. And somebody from Scranton, Connecticut can go, wait a minute, I make that item. Okay, it's a good quality and stuff like that. So it will provide the general public access to that. Okay, now that last bullet there, increased content. As you remember, old rule. If you had 50.1% of the steel, the copper, what have you, that was domestic and going into a component, that was a domestic component. President Trump raised that under a final order that just went into effect just about 2 months ago now. For most items, except COTS, commercial off-the-shelf items, that's now 55%. Okay? It could increase further under a Biden administration, but it's 55%, except for iron and steel. Okay, now that's 95%. Okay, the iron and steel industry in the United States has been pretty much hammered since World War II. So President Trump and President Biden are hell-bent for leather to get those back on their feet and vibrant. Okay, next slide, please, Jeremy. Now, President Biden, in that executive order, also said we're going to change how we measure the domestic content. Now, here, the executive order, and this is not a criticism, it's kind of general, it's kind of vague. Okay, we're going to measure the value, because we've had situations where, well, after we did this, we dusted this, or we wiped it in oil or something like that, and that added another 18%. That makes it a domestic component. So they're going to come out with a final rule eventually, and I don't know how they're going to phrase it, but no, we're going to look at the value of what you did domestically to determine whether or not this is truly a domestic content item. Now that next bullet. I need to, many of you know this, many of you do not. The Buy American Act is designed to be a shield to protect domestic suppliers. It is not meant to be a sword so that they can gouge the government into paying a higher price. So the old rule prior to the Trump change, was 6% and 12%. 6% was added to a foreign competitor of a domestic large business. 12% would be added to a foreign competitor of a domestic small business. What the heck does that mean? The government is buying something. Foreign supply bids $100. Domestic large business bids $105. Clearly more expensive. For valuation purposes, 6% would be added to the foreign supply bid. So it would be evaluated as if it was $106. Therefore, the domestic bid of $105 would be reasonable and would get the contract. For small businesses, 12% would be added. President Trump has raised that to 20% or 30%, 20% for large businesses, 30% for small business. Now, President Biden has indicated he may raise that again. Now, for those of you who deal with the Defense Department, it's 50% now. Now, President Trump, to get the same result, essentially, had added a lot of tariffs, okay? Very controversial, okay? There's no indication that President Biden is going to continue those tariffs, but he may get there by, for evaluation purposes, increasing that 20 to 30%. Again, it is a bid to help domestic industry, and I'm going to come back to that again in a moment. Now, that next bullet, now that's all very nice to talk about, but there's going to be some problems. It's expensive. It's expensive. You are foregoing a less expensive foreign supply in favor of a more expensive domestic supply. Now, that might be a good value judgment, but it's going to cost you more money up front. And secondly, in the short range, a lot of times there is no adequate domestic supplier, or not one who can produce it quickly enough or in sufficient quantities. So there'll be a problem there. one of the things that President Trump had done, and I'm no doubt that President Biden will continue, a very healthy loan financing situation. So if someone in Puyallup, Washington goes, right now, I don't do that thing that you need, government. I don't know if any domestic supplier does, but I'd like to start, but I need some financing. So they will basically provide financing for that. There is now under the executive order, a new Made in America office in OMB. So it will go up to a very high level to get these waivers approved. Now, that agency reporting requirements. In this area, it's not that President Trump changed the rules a lot. He enforced them, as I mentioned. One of the things he did is he required more reporting on what the agencies have been doing. President Biden has continued that. Within 180 days of that executive order, the agencies must explain their record on granting waivers to the Buy American Act. And thereafter, they must do it every 6 months. So those of you who remember the older days when getting a waiver from the Buy American Act was a piece of cake, those days are gone, okay? To put teeth in it, there will likely be an increase in fraud enforcement. Now, as all of you contractors know, when you get a solicitation, right in the solicitation, the Buy American Act solicitation, I promise that I'm going to comply with the Buy American Act except into the following. And then there's a blank space where you can list, well, no, I'm going to get my ball bearings from Germany or something like that. Many contractors don't fill anything in, or they just write none in, and then they get the contract. And then they go to the contracting officer, well, give me a waiver so I can provide these things from Germany or Saudi Arabia. Oh, you got a major problem at that point, okay? Because then the contracting officer can say, no, I'm not going to give that. Okay? I'm breaking faith with the rest of the bidders. You said none. I gave you a chance. The list exceptions, you didn't do it, comply. If you don't comply, I have my full contractual remedies. If I find out after the fact that you didn't comply, false statement, false claim. So very big risk there. Finally, a thing I wanted to mention on this slide, President Biden's executive order reaffirmed the Jones Act. Now, the Jones Act is a maritime statute. It's been around for a long time, maybe over a century now, come to think of it. One of the things it says is, if a ship goes to one U.S. domestic port and then goes from there to another U.S. domestic port, from Miami to New Orleans, for example, it's got to be an American-built ship. It's been a tremendous boom for the American shipbuilding industry. In many ways, it's what's helped that industry stay afloat. It's very expensive for the government, but it's an important act, and President Biden has reaffirmed that, okay? Now, next slide, Jeremy. Okay. Now, for those of you who are tired of listening to me, this is my last slide, but I've got to spend a few minutes on it. Cybersecurity and supply chain security, okay? Every once in a while in government contracting, there is a buzz phrase that you hear it over and over. Best value is certainly a main one. Now it is cybersecurity. On November 30th, 2020, the Defense Department rolled out its CMMC program, its Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. Came out with 5 levels under that, level 1 through level 5, okay? They added a new subsection to the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulatory Supplement. They added 9 new provisions and clauses. They will not be fully effective until 2025. But once they are fully effective, you will not get a new award, or you will not even get an option exercise unless you comply with the appropriate level of CMMC certification. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, I don't deal with the Defense Department. I don't care. Or you're thinking, well, shoot, I'm a landscape contractor. I don't need all that highfalutin stuff. I don't deal with classified information or something like that. Think again, okay? First, the DoD program is based on the NIST program. So this is the same type of requirements that a lot of your commercial customers are going to require or are already requiring. Secondly, a lot of agencies that don't have DoD's resources will take a look at what the Defense Department did, and then they will simply model themselves after it, okay? So be aware of that. Understand that the key phrase, here is CUI, confidential unclassified information. Sometimes you'll hear CDI, confidential defense information. So we're not necessarily talking about some highfalutin super secret CIA contract. If you're a janitorial services contractor, you have the map for all the offices in this federal building that you're going to be the janitor for. If you wouldn't put that on Facebook, that's the type of information that the government is going to expect that you have some protection for, that you're not so easily hacked. Now, level 1, you just have to comply with 15 security requirements. Okay, and they're not terribly difficult. Level 2, you've got to comply with 65 security requirements, and it goes on up. But again, this is just on unclassified information. If you're dealing with the top secret things, that's a different world. The reason for all of that is a week doesn't go by probably that we don't hear of a new hacking. Now, some of those hacking are just by bored teenagers, okay? Some is by criminal elements. Some is by foreign governments, and that's the real problem. The SolarWinds disaster. SolarWinds is a company out of Texas, provides a lot of software that the government uses, Microsoft uses, a foreign government, most probably the Russian government, so said by the FBI officially, put a worm there. So that when you downloaded their software, that was in there. So Congress was up in arms. Seems like every new statute, every new Appropriations Act has new requirements for cyber security. So that's coming. It's here and it is coming. Now I'm going to go a little bit into the supply chain security. Okay, when I talk about supply chain, I need to go back to some of the things we've talked about here. Cybersecurity and also domestic sources. Okay. First off, that section 889 there in the 4th bullet, that is section 889 of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2019. Okay. That came about after basically Congress discovered that there was a variety of Chinese companies, 5 particular Chinese companies that were providing communications equipment, cameras and things like that, that were easily hacked and such by the Chinese government. So they basically prohibited the government and contractors from using those products. That list will undoubtedly be added to. Now, that 4th bullet there, excuse me, the 5th bullet there. President Biden on that date, I don't even think it's got a number yet, issued an executive order securing America's critical supply chains. Now, this is a continuation of something that President Trump had done. President Trump had added 3 executive orders on this issue. Remember what I said earlier about we could not replicate the arsenal of democracy of World War II. What the Trump and Biden administration have discovered is that there are a lot of things that, even aside from cybersecurity, we don't have adequate or any domestic suppliers for this. The Trump administration discovered that for our night vision goggles, which are critical, one essential component, there's only one supplier for it. It's in Germany. Okay. So President Trump and now President Biden have come out with executive orders specifically dealing with batteries, computer chips, pharmaceuticals, critical elements, rare earth, critical materials, and rare earth elements. And one particular problem there was the Chinese government was trying to get a monopoly or an exclusivity on rare earth elements, something that is very critical for defense and intelligence purposes. So there is a string of executive orders that have been issued now by the past two by the president and the prior administration about protecting the critical supply chains, not just in terms of cybersecurity, but we have to foster the ability domestically to do that. And President Biden specifically focused on pharmaceuticals. During the pandemic, a lot of times we discovered that our essential pharmaceuticals came from China. So remember on an earlier slide, I talked about research and development. I emphasized the word including. This is going to be a big area. Okay? We've got to have research and development to increase or fill these gaping holes there. The Buy American Act will certainly be amplified to make sure that, no, we've got to develop a domestic supply here. Okay? Now, that last bullet there, if you're not familiar with the Federal Acquisition Security Council, you'll get familiar with them. Basically, it started in 2018. This is not one of those councils where every federal agency has a seat at the table. It is chaired by Office of Management and Budget. The attendees are the Defense Department, Homeland Security, GSA, Commerce Department, Justice Department, and the Director of National Intelligence. So their job will be, okay, what are the absolutely critical items that we need to, for example, to defend the country against a pandemic, against a biological, chemical, radiological, nuclear attack, and do we have the ability to do those domestically? One other item I want to mention in this regard, and with the domestic preference is of the earlier statute. President Biden specifically mentioned, and this is a mouthful, the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. It's been around for 30 years or so. It has offices in every one, it has centers in every one of the 50 states and the Puerto Rico. They will be given new emphasis now and new ability to pair workers or companies, producers with particular needs under the Buy American Act and under the supply chain requirements. Okay, so that was my last slide. It was a very probably frustratingly quick analysis of things. For some of them, I have to put my my crystal ball in front of me to try to look at those things, but they were very educated guesses looking at the last time a Democratic administration had been in the White House. Everything that I said applies to small businesses, okay? Some of the things I said apply only to small businesses. But one way or the other, small businesses, whether you are a direct contractor to the government or a 12th tier subcontractor to the government, you've got to be aware of that. The rules are changing. We're facing threats that we've never faced before. But there will be a flood of money such as no one on this call has ever seen before. Okay? We don't see amounts like this since the early days of World War II, really. So it is a time of tremendous opportunity, but it is a minefield. You've got to be able to negotiate that minefield very, very adroitly, okay? So with that, I think I'm very close to my time limit. As I say to every group, I am an absolutely beloved guest speaker. And it is not because of the brilliance of my remarks. It is not because of the comprehensiveness of my material. It is because I never go over my allotted time. So I will turn this back now to you, Melinda, for whichever you want to do.
Thank you so much. And we do have one question.
Okay.
It's the question is the 20 to 30% Buy American bid increase relating to the prime contractor total bid or by a specific item such as rebar.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that. Does it apply to rebar?
I'll read it again just in case. Relating to the prime contractor's total bid or by specific items such as rebar.
Oh, it will look at the component. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it the first time. It will look at the component. For example, the prime contractor's bid, a lot of that might be labor costs, okay? Which, you know, they might be using domestic labor, it might be for services, but they will look at the individual components, okay? So if you're buying steel, that's easy. If you're buying a construction project, 20% of the bid will be foreign rebar, then it will be added to that component of the bid. By the way, to expand on that, one gaping loophole in the Buy American Act is services. The Buy American Act came out in March of 1933 when it was stuff, steel, cement, things like that. Well, now, as you all know, most federal procurement dollars are spent on services, but the Buy American Act doesn't apply there. It's a gaping hole, and I hope they fill that because an awful lot of domestic suppliers are being screwed. I mean, the technical legal term, by having drafting, for example, of architectural drawings done overseas, and then you're totally underpricing domestic. Well, I'm babbling now. Go. Is there any other question, Melinda?
That is the only question I see. Does anybody else have any questions?
I see a question from Rhonda. The slides are virtually always referring to presidential executive orders. The one on the stopping of the Trump border wall, that was a presidential proclamation. They are all listed in the Federal Register. I have that one page which lists the major ones, but you almost need to check your newspaper every day. The administration keeps coming out with another one. Okay.
Thank you so very much. Does anyone else have any questions? Please either enter them into the Q&A, the chat, or unmute yourself. That could get a little crazy if we have a lot of you, but we've got a few more minutes, so great opportunity. I see another question just popped into the Q&A. Yes, all the video and slides will be shared, yes. Any others? This is a great opportunity. We don't often get someone of Mr. Nagel's expertise easily available to us. So please, I see another question or so. Let's see. Why implementing North American Free Trade Agreement if the U.S. is blocking the NAFTA and their contracts?
Okay. Remember NAFTA was superseded by the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. Now, depending on if you're dealing with a contract that was awarded, say, in 2016 or early 2017, it probably invokes NAFTA. So they would honor They would honor that because that was part of the contractual agreement. So it depends on when your contract was awarded. I hope that that answered the question. The problem with the Buy American Act, for example, there have always been exemptions to that. NAFTA, U.S.-Israel Free Trade Implementation Act, the U.S. Free Trade Agreement, Caribbean Free Trade Initiative. So the Buy American Act is an incredibly complicated thing to administer. I don't really know how poor contracting officers can do it. It is that complicated, okay?
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got another question. Do you anticipate, will there be additional support from SBA?
I have not seen any indication that SBA will be staffing up. Their new administrator just took off, just was sworn in a week ago today, and she indicated that she will be focused on COVID for the foreseeable future. I mean, not exclusively, but that's going to be her focus. For example, remember I mentioned that 26.8 billion for restaurants. SBA say we're going to start receiving applications for that on April 8th. SBA is going to be tremendously busy, but I haven't seen any indication that SBA is going to be given personnel authorizations to be hiring more people. So will there be a need for more SBA support? Absolutely. Will they have the ability to provide it? I'm not sure. In SBA's defense, SBA has never been funded commensurately with the requirements that are imposed on it. Okay, so I fear that unless they start throwing more money for the personnel side of SBA, they will not be able to continue to provide the requisite support for all the new programs and money they're going to have to be involved with.
Thank you. We've got another question here. Is the Biden change to 95% steel related to the origin of the material, i.e. the ore, or manufacturing location?
Okay, I can see it up on the origin of the material. As I recall, it typically looks at not only the domestic content, but when did it reach its final usable form? Okay, so the ore might have been mined in Romania. The ore is taken across the border to Bulgaria, and there it reaches its final usable form. Well, that's not a great example. Say it is mined in Nicaragua and is brought up to the U.S., to Texas, where it is taken to a mill and is formed. In all likelihood, unless we're still waiting again for the final rules on the Biden executive order, that would constitute, would have a very good chance at constituting a domestic supply, but I'm not sure, because there you've got the origin was Nicaragua, the ore, but the manufacturing process, which made it usable, didn't occur until the United States. They would probably have to look at how much was added in terms of real value. Remember, that's one thing that the Biden administration executive order is looking at that really changed that. I don't know if I helped you. Buy American Act issues, by the way, are incredibly complicated to deal with, because very often it is a factual question, not a legal question. When and where did it reach its final usable form? Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, another question here. How will the government try to expand their ownership grab of contractor intellectual property? At this time, we see FAR, DFAR clauses that still allow ownership by contractor with unlimited rights to the government. We try whenever possible to get the government purpose rights.
Yes. Remember what I said, the DFAR is supposed to come out this year with a new intellectual property clause. Now that will apply only to DOD, but they want more individual rights to that. But I agree with the questioner. Ownership is different from rights, okay? The Louvre owns the Mona Lisa. They may have sold the rights to reproduce the image of the Mona Lisa to postcard companies, to poster companies, whatever, but ownership remains with the Louvre. Basically, as long as the federal government, as long as the agency, the federal government has rights in the data, okay, they can reproduce it with either unlimited rights or government purpose rights. I'm not really sure why the government would care. Because one part of the government wants to diffuse that knowledge throughout society, assuming it's not classified how to make a hydrogen bomb or something like that. The government has always had two heads about this. One side of the government says, we want to diffuse that knowledge throughout society. I mean, were it not for intellectual property rights, you would have never heard of Alexander Graham Bell, Bill Boeing, Walt Disney, okay? Another part of the government basically goes, doggone it, we paid for that money and we want to own it. You don't need to own it, government. I'm getting on a soapbox here. You just need to have rights in it that meet your needs. Okay, I don't know if I've answered that person question, but the short answer is they're going to come out with new clauses. Those will not be read into existing contracts, or if the government tries to do that, a contractor could have a very good argument that, hey, you owe me more money, or that's beyond scope. I would never have agreed to give you my intellectual property rights under this contract. I would have walked away from it. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another question. Will Department of Defense provide some of that support then for small businesses? I believe this is probably in reference to the limited funding for SBA, but I could be wrong.
That's right. I made the same assumption, and the answer is I don't know. Okay. DOD, anyone involved in government contracting in the Defense Department especially, is going to have their hands full for the next few years. So I don't know how much support they will be able to give small businesses. They might very well be tasked to do that. Whether they have the personnel to do that is different. Those of you who remember in the early days of the Reagan administration, as I do, it was great being in DOD. We had, for lack of expression, an unlimited budget. But we were just swamped with work, and to be quite honest, we had some terrible scandals because of it, because we couldn't watch every procurement. So, a long-winded answer to your question: will DoD provide some of the support? Yes. Will they be tasked to provide more support? Yes. Will they be able to provide that unless their staffing levels are increased and their overtime levels increased? I doubt it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Last call. Any more questions from the field? Going once, going twice.
Hi, Kay. I believe we have a question in the chat box.
Okay. In reference to veteran-owned businesses, are there any rule changes considered to the FAR for consolidation of approval levels for contracts taking business away from them, specifically for the VA, where they are mandated requirements? Also, how will we monitor strategic sourcing contracts that are pushing them out of business? And finally, are there going to be checks and balances for how they perform and a review of the program of their program's support to the small business community by other than the SBA?
Okay. First, I'm not aware of any FAR changes regarding VA contracts. As you all, I'm sure, know, once a FAR change is contemplated, they provide a number to it, and they post that. I don't remember anything off the top of my head regarding a FAR change. Now, that's different from a change to the SBA regs or to the VA acquisition regulation. There have been a variety of cases involving the VA. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were changes to either SBA regs or VA regs, but I haven't seen anything yet percolating up to a proposed FAR case number on that. Okay. Then I can see that how will we monitor strategic sourcing contracts that are pushing them out of business? Okay. I do not know that if you are a strategic sourced contract and you feel that you are being pushed out of business, for example, competition overseas, I think one main thing you should do is contact your member of Congress to say, hey, I am a critical supplier. The government has not awarded a contract to me, for 2 years because I'm losing out to others. This is not in the government's long-term best interest. And let your member of Congress, who would be happy to fight that battle for you. I would also notify the Federal Acquisition Security Council. That is their job to do that. So that I think would be viable remedies. And then, and finally, are there going to be checks and balances for how they perform and a review of their programs support to the small business community by other than the SBA? I assume the individual contracting officer, being the PCO or the ACO, will be, again, I have to assume that you're talking about, say, a foreign supplier who did that. Ultimately, initially, it would be the individual contracting officer and his or her staff who would evaluate, okay, is what this foreign supplier delivering what they promised to deliver? Have they delayed it? Are there any problems with it? So I think that would be the first basis of the checks and balances, if I understood the question correctly, because obviously the SBA does not have the capability to evaluate, well, is that laptop, for example, is that comply with the contract? That really is the contracting officer and his or her staff's bailiwick to assure that there has been a proper administration and delivery of the contract by that lower priced foreign supplier. I hope I answered that question.
There's one more question from Rhonda. It says, do the updates apply to contract and grants?
Oh, okay. By updates, I mean the new executive orders, and I assume you mean to an existing contract or grant. Normally, a new executive order does not automatically apply to an existing contract or grant. So if you got a contract a year ago and you're performing, or a grant a year ago, and you are performing in accordance with that, and a new statute or a new executive order comes out, it does not automatically apply to that. Now, sometimes Congress has said, no, this is going to apply to any, for example, on an IDIQ contract. This will apply to any orders issued to that contract after the effective date of the statute. I haven't seen an executive order that says that. But normally, if that happens, the contractor, and there's a FAR site for this, it's FAR 1.108, it's either C or D. Contracts may be changed by later changes, but they require consideration, okay? Because you're changing the rules in the middle of the ball game. The contractor might say, okay, that's going to cost me more money. I want an increase in my contract price or delay. But the FAR doesn't address one other thing. Very often a contractor might say, no, that is beyond the scope of this contract. I assure you, government, I would never have signed this contract if that were permissible. A long-winded answer to your question, but do they apply? Normally, no. And if the government wants to apply them to existing contracts and grants, the government has to take affirmative action to do that. It may cost the government more money, and the contractor may be able to say, no, that's beyond scope. I'm out of this contract.
Thank you very much. I think from the looks of it, that pretty well wraps up the questions we've got floating right now. Mr. Nagel, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a real pleasure to have you present and be a part of our lessons and learning for this event. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us and sharing your expertise.
I was delighted to do it. Guys, take it easy. Kate, always great to talk to you, and best of luck to you guys on your next and the next day and a half as you go all through this. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we are going to roll into another presentation in about, let's look at the clock here, in about 5 minutes. So let's take a quick 5-minute break. So if anybody needs to refresh or refill a coffee mug or something, we will come back live at 35 past the hour. So 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, is everybody back? Have we got our cups of coffee refilled and ready to go? Okay, this is the funny part where I'm talking and I really can't see any responses, but I'm going to go with it. It's now 36 after the hour, so welcome back. Let's roll on over into our mentor protege topic. We are very, very fortunate to have Ms. Mercedes Thurston joining us from the Department of the Navy, Office of Small Business Programs. She is the Mentor Protege Program Manager. It's a real honor to have you represent the Navy and come join us today. Prior to joining OSBP, she was a contracting officer with NAVSEA, Naval Sea System Command. She has experience dealing with various acquisitions to include major weapon systems, shipbuilding, research and development, and professional and engineering support services. Currently, she manages all active and non-active mentor-protege agreements. She also educates the acquisition workforce about the mentor-protege program. Thank you for joining us today. Please welcome Ms. Mercedes Thurston.
Good morning or good afternoon where I am. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Mercedes Thurston and I'm the Department of Navy Office of Small Business Program Manager. If we can go to the next slide. So today I want to talk to you about the Mentor Protege Program. The Mentor Protege Program is a program that can assist small businesses in developing and enhancing skills, capabilities, and efficiencies that will help them to, one, participate more effectively in federal government contracting marketplace, two, successfully perform contract work, and three, be a value-added member of the defense industrial base. The Mentor Protege Program was established in fiscal year 1991 in response to DoD prime contractors' concerns for small disadvantaged businesses that did not possess technical capabilities necessary to perform contractor requirements. The program attempts to address this challenge by helping primes achieve their SDB subcontracting goals. The program provides incentives to DoD prime contractors to assist small businesses in enhancing business development and technology capabilities, increasing subcontracting participation in government and commercial contracts, and positioning the small businesses for prime contracting opportunities by increasing protege firms' technical and business infrastructure capabilities. Next slide, please. The biggest objective of the Mentor Protege Program is to establish, increase, and maintain a strong and more capable small business industrial base to support the warfighter. This is done by fostering the establishment of long-term business relationships, which benefits DoD and the defense industrial base, while also increasing the small business industrial base, competitive markets, and utilizations for non-traditional and commercial companies. Next slide, please. The Mentor Protege Program provides various benefits to both industry and government. Industry capabilities can be enhanced, resulting in higher quality products and services. Industry mentors can provide direct assistance, including financial assistance to smaller subcontractors, and mentors gain a qualified subcontractor through the protege that could possibly avoid competitions for subcontractors. All of those benefits are translated into benefits for the government and the Navy. The mentor-protege relationship can bring innovative technology into an established acquisition program, develop a more capable small business industrial base and robust supply chain, and ensure contractors have not just the capability, but capacity to meet government requirements. Next slide. Oh, go back one for me. Thank you. This chart shows the amount of work proteges have contributed to the DoD industrial base from 2013 to 2017. And this is not just Navy, this is all of the agencies within DoD. So that's why we only go back to 2017. They're generating new information now. Since 2013, current and former mentor-protege programs, proteges have contributed almost $16 billion worth of work to the DoD industrial base. In fiscal year 17 alone, there were over 350 former proteges on prime contracts for the Department of Defense. Next slide. This chart shows the amount of work proteges have contributed to the Navy from 2016 to 2020. From 2016 to 2020, current and former proteges have contributed over $2 billion worth of work to the Department of Navy industrial base. And in 2020 alone, there were over 214 proteges on prime contracts for the Department of Navy. Next slide. The Mentor Protege Program is currently open for business. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 reauthorized the program through 30 September 2024. The NDAA made a few changes from what was previously the Mentor Protege Program, including decreasing the agreement length from 3 years to 2 years, and remove the requirement for small businesses needing to be half the size standard of NAICS codes. So for those of you who are familiar with the Mentor Protege or was familiar with the Mentor Protege program, previously the agreements were 3 years. They're now a 2-year agreement. And before, in order for small businesses to participate, they had to be half the size standard of a NAICS code. That has been completely removed, and size standard doesn't matter as long as you're dedicated as a small business, and I'll go into the details of that in a couple of slides down. But that was a huge lift that provided the opportunity for more small businesses to participate in the Mentor Protege program if they weren't as small as some of the ones they had participated before. The DON awards and administers Mentor Protege agreements in accordance with DFARS 219.71, Appendix I, and the DON Mentor Protege Program Guidebook. We are always accepting new Mentor Protege agreements. Mentor Protege agreements will be reviewed and approved during June and November. If workload permits, our office will process the MPAs outside of those timeframes. OSBP is always looking for Mentor Protege agreement efforts that focus in development areas of knowledge base, manufacturing, and research and development for small businesses. Okay, next slide. So just because proteges are small don't mean they can't make a difference. This slide demonstrates just a few of the Navy's program of records that current and past proteges have implemented. One program is the My Navy HR, which is the Navy personnel and pay modernization effort that works to develop the infrastructure to support modernized app-based personnel system. A Don protege is leveraging their expertise in agile software development as a subcontractor on this program. Another program is the Zumwalt class destroyer. This particular protege was a non-Perry Award winner and provides complex products and services to include customized testing capabilities and solutions that contribute to the development process of products and services and service deliverables on the Zumwalt class destroyer and the APY 10 that you see above. So this just goes to show that while many of the small businesses, or we consider small businesses, may not be seen to do a lot, they definitely have a big hand in the Navy in providing those critical products and services to ensure that our warfighters are safe. Next slide, please. To be eligible to be a mentor, a contractor must be, one, eligible to receive a federal contract, have at least one prime contract with at least one active subcontracting plan, have Department of Defense contracts totaling at least 100 million from previous fiscal years, and must demonstrate that they can provide qualified assistance and be in a good financial health. Also, they must not be debarred or suspended. Some benefits mentors gain from participating in the program is developing a long-term business relationship with small disadvantaged businesses, developing or increasing their small disadvantaged business subcontracting base, and increased opportunities with proteges to win new contracts in subcontracts. To apply to be a mentor, the applications to be a mentor have to go through the DoD website. And I believe in my backup slides, I do have the link to the DoD mentor protege page, where mentors who are interested in potentially becoming mentors for the Department of Defense, specifically Department of Navy Mentor Protege Program, they can go and apply. Next slide, please. So to be eligible to be a protege, you must fall within one of the socioeconomic categories in the middle of this slide. Recently added was the last bullet, which identifies an entity providing goods or services in a private sector critical to enhancing DoD supplier base. A protege must also be eligible for award of a federal contract and must not be owned by the mentoring company. Protege benefits include gaining technical assistance, increased teaming opportunities with mentors, and long-term industrial-based partnerships with DoD. Next slide, please. So how do you participate in the Mentor Protege Program? First, as I mentioned before, the mentor must submit their application with DoD and get the approval to be a mentor. Next step is the mentor aligns with the protege. The Navy does not release a solicitation or a BAA, so it's important for the mentors and proteges to develop their relationship and bring that relationship to the Navy to show that, hey, we're in a partnership and we feel like we can offer the Navy these innovative solutions that could help and continue the industrial base. Mentors, we typically, or we always say that we want the mentor and the protege to have had a relationship before, because the mentor protege program takes a lot of time and effort. So we, the government, never try to partner companies together. We want it to be an organic relationship, and a relationship where the companies know each other, they can work together, they understand their strengths and weaknesses. So when they become a part of the Mentor Protege program, they're not in awkward positions when they have to make decisions on things that need to be completed. So once that mentor and protege have aligned, you then want to identify a major buying command. So the mentor identifies a major buying command for sponsorship. Selecting a command for sponsorship should be based on the product or services that the mentor and protege can provide to that command. For example, if the contractor specializes and provides products in construction, they should not seek sponsorship from NAVC or NAVAIR, but should look to NAVFAC. After you've identified that command, you want to have an introductory briefing. So the introductory briefing includes the stakeholders, where we kind of discuss what the tentative plan is between the mentor and the protege for the mentor-protege agreement that they are trying to get approval for. The introductory briefing includes stakeholders such as a representative from the Department of Navy OSBP office, which is typically me or my support, the small business director from the command in which you're trying to obtain sponsor or endorsement from, the technical team from that command, if you know of a program office that could support and benefit, or that would support and benefit from the efforts that you will complete under this mentor protege agreement, it would be good to have them there. And of course, the key members from the mentor and protege companies. At the introductory briefing, if sponsorship is solidified, the mentor will provide a white paper or other initial documents identifying proposed agreements to the major buying commands and the customer submitted, and the customer supported. So after the introductory briefing, you would then start to put together a white paper and ensure that everything that was discussed at the briefing is included in that white paper that will then turn into the next step, which is the submission of the mentor protege agreement. A formal mentor protege agreement is then submitted to the command for approval and then submission to my office for final approval. And finally, once the mentor protege agreement is approved, funds will be submitted to the Navy Center of Excellence, and a standalone contract will be issued to the mentor for the mentor protege agreement. A detailed flow and description of this process can be found in the DONS mentor protege program guidebook on the Department of Navy OSBP website. Next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with a major buying command or a command, as I mentioned before, to participate in the mentor protege program, you have to receive sponsorship from a command. So the Navy has 10 major buying commands, and is the responsibility of the mentor and the protege to determine which major buying command would support their agreement. The partnership should identify how the proposed agreement would benefit the major buying command and which customer or program of record would be supported. As mentioned, the Navy has 10 major buying commands, each responsible for specific duties to support the warfighter. Each command has identified challenges and capability gaps in which they believe small businesses can fill. Each command also has a small business director and small business professionals that can assist you in identifying opportunities or potential gaps. And so I say that to say, if a mentor and a protege have come together and you know your goods or services support a particular command, but you're not sure of all of the opportunities or what current programs or what future program of records you feel you could support or provide an impact to, those small business professionals and small business directors, reach out to them and have that conversation because they can help you look at the long range acquisition forecast and determine what programs and what technical offices you would want to speak with to gain that sponsorship and endorsement for the mentor protege agreement. Next slide, please. So for a mentor protege agreement, there are 3 types. Next slide. The first type is a reimbursable agreement. A reimbursable agreement provides monetary reimbursement for the cost of developmental assistance incurred by the mentoring firm and services provided to the protege in accordance with the approved agreement. So your cost of what will be reimbursed is determined by the agreement, the formal proposal agreement that was submitted before the agreement was approved. So the proposal will lay out by both years the different tasks that you intend to complete and the amount or cost that's associated with it. As a part of the mentor protege agreement, we always, it's required to have some type of assistance from HBCU, minority institution, or PTAC of at least 5%. And then other allowable costs include labor costs and costs for developmental trainings and conferences. So the Mentor Protege program has a yearly conference. The Navy has their yearly conferences, and all of those costs for the proteges can be included in the Mentor Protege agreement to be reimbursed to the prime. Next slide, please. The second type of mentor protege agreement is the credit agreement. A credit agreement allows the mentor to receive credit towards their subcontracting goals for their costs that they've incurred in assisting the protege. And then the final one is a hybrid, which is a combination of the reimbursable and credit agreement. 1 year must be a credit and 1 year must be reimbursable. Determining which one comes first will be laid out in your mentor protege agreement that will be agreed upon at the very beginning and followed throughout the life of the agreement. Both the credit and the hybrid agreement will require DCMA approval regardless of which defense agency the agreement is with. All credit agreements are administered by DCMA. So credit agreements, if a company is interested in just getting a credit agreement, my office would not handle that particular mentor protege agreement. That would go straight to DCMA. Okay, next slide. So to assist with the new cybersecurity compliance, participants in the Mentor Protege program includes participation in the Project Spectrum pilot program. The chart above details the CMMC compliance timeline and shows by fiscal year 2025, CMMC compliance will be required for all DoD contracts above the micro purchase threshold, except for COTS. The Project Spectrum initiative works with small businesses and supports them on their compliance journey. Compliance with existing regulations, DFARS Clause 252-204-7008 and 204-7002, which requires compliance with NIST SP 800-171, safeguarding of defense relevant information, and cyber incident reporting. CMMC, built upon NIST requirements, will require a certified third-party assessment of company in the defense industrial base. Next slide. Project Spectrum gives Mentor Protege participants educational training, resources, and tools and direct coaching to support manufacturing, cyber hygiene, cybersecurity policy, regulation, and upcoming CMMC compliance. Ultimately, Project Spectrum is ensuring that participants of the Mentor Protege program are CMMC compliance and ready, which is another added benefit to participating in the program for not only the prime, but the mentor. The mentor now has a approved small business that fits in one of the socioeconomic categories that will also be CMMC compliant, which is huge considering the direction that we're going. Next slide. So over and beyond the mentor protege program, the expectation of the protege to participate in Project Spectrum is to make cybersecurity a priority and commit resources to maintain this compliance. Participation in the Project Spectrum pilot program, especially for the protege participants of manufacturing companies that may not have a dedicated or on-site IT support staff, will directly affect their journey to compliance. Project Spectrum can potentially help proteges and mentors more effectively allocate resources within their mentor-protege agreement. So we say that to say there is a cost limit on mentor-protege agreements of $1 million a year. And a lot of previous mentors and proteges were spending a lot of their budget on doing cyber hygiene and cybersecurity. Well, DoD is taking that cost completely away, which leaves the door and opportunity open for the mentors and the proteges to use that or reallocate those funds more effectively, which in turn is ensuring that we're getting these small businesses cyber ready and also building them and building their infrastructure in different areas. It is expected of about 10 hours per week for proteges for the Project Spectrum. We all know cybersecurity is not an easy topic. And so Project Spectrum estimates about 10 hours per week, in addition to the efforts that you're doing with the Mentor Protege program. And it's for the life of your mentor protege agreement. So by signing up to do your mentor protege agreement for 2 months, you're agreeing to also do Project Spectrum for 2 months. Next slide. Thank you. Protege participation includes a customized and scaffolding journey towards CMMC compliance. The process is divided through 4 phases and is influenced by the level of CMMC compliance required for each protege. So as you can see on the slide, it kind of goes through the evolution of it, but this just goes to show that each one, by participating in Project Spectrum, is not a one size fits all. Project Spectrum works with each protege or each company and customizes their cybersecurity journey and what needs to happen. And you have access to that coach and the necessary tools to get you to where you need to be, because all companies aren't on the same level. So it's going to walk you through and get you to the point where you can be CMMC certified ready. Okay. All right, some key dates that I always ask people to remember is that the mentor protege agreements are always accepted November 1st, or excuse me, are evaluated November 1st through the 30th and June 1st through the 30th. As I mentioned before, if our workload permits and our office has time, we will process them at any point in time. So don't feel like you have to hold off your mentor protege agreement until this point in time. Please feel free to submit it at any point in time. But we dedicate these 2 months without the year to fully evaluate and look and approve mentor protege agreements. Next slide. So this slide lays out a lot of the policies, regulations, and websites that I discussed in the presentation. Noting the second bullet under the Department of Navy is the Mentor Protege Guidebook. And I recommend that be the first step that you go to when developing or starting to potentially get your mentor protege agreements together. Of course, my office is always a resource, but this is one that's in writing that you can look at. And then the last bullet, of course, will link you to the mentor application for those large businesses who want to become a mentor in the mentor protege program. Next slide. And then, of course, this is my contact information. As I said, I'm always a resource. Me and my team are here to answer any questions that may come up If you're interested in thinking about doing a mentor protege agreement, feel free to reach out to me and ask all of the questions that you want. This is my job. So if I can guide you, guide your company, introduce you to the small business director of the major buying command that you may be trying to get in contact with, that's my job and that's what I'm here to do. So with that being said, I am open to questions.
Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, please put them either into the chat or into the Q&A. Okay, we've got a question.
Okay.
How does the Department of Navy plan to verify the small business status of the protege? With their reps and will their reps and certs be sufficient?
So we would go into, you have to be in SAMS. So we'll double check your status in SAMS. If you feel that your status is not correct in that system, please let us know. But we use all of the federal systems to determine if the small business is actually the small business. So yes, sometimes reps and certs can play a part in it, and those reps and certs will be included in the mentor protege agreement proposal. That will be one of the requirements in submitting your mentor protege proposal.
Thank you. Another question. Does the mentor need to have another prime contract that they use to provide the protege with some subcontract support?
No, so the mentor just needs to have one prime contract with DoD that has a subcontracting agreement. That does not necessarily mean that the mentor or prime contractor has to have a current subcontractor agreement with the protege under a DoD contract. So it's always kind of assumed if you're partnering with the mentor protege program, the two companies have done work together, but we're not requiring that work have been done on a DoD contract. We just, one, need to make sure that the mentor can actually provide the insight and those mentoring tools. And then the government is here to provide that additional incentive and support to help the mentor continue to guide and build up or assist the small business in building up their infrastructure so that they can have a better partner and relationship that will hopefully get them to being subcontractors on DoD contracts. So no, at the initial beginning, the prime doesn't, or the mentor doesn't need to have a subcontract with the protege, but the hopes is by the end of the mentor protege agreement, that protege is now a subcontractor on multiple contracts with the prime.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got another question. Can your SDVOSB or service disabled veteran-owned small business status be self-certified, or does it have to be CVE?
We'll go with self-certified for now. Because the approval goes through my office. So if you can provide that information and I can verify it, and when I say my office, I'm the final approval and our director signs off on it. So I feel like the self-certification that you provide is enough justification. Then we could potentially work with it. But if we needed more information, then I would say we would CVE it.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Where does the funding for the program come from?
Great question. The money does not come from your command. It does not come from your program office. It does not come from your contract shop. The DOD and Congress have a budget for the Mentor Protege program. So we have a pot of money for a Mentor Protege program that's just sitting and waiting to be used. So that's one of the, I guess I should probably highlight that more in my presentation. The funds do not come from government or particular programs of records or anything like that. There's a government Congress approved amount budget that we can spend yearly for these Mentor Protege agreements, which is a good opportunity for program managers. If you know of a small business who's working with a large business and they have this innovative technology, you kind of want to work it before you can really ramp it onto your contract because you need to palm it in your budget. The Mentor Protege program is a good avenue for that because you get to work with these two companies, kind of update any of the technology or the software and see if it's something that you guys can kind of use within your program. And then hopefully by the end of the Mentor Protege program, you would have palmed and you can then include that particular piece of technology or software or service into your program of record. So the money for reimbursable contracts comes from DOD and it's not linked to anybody. You just got to make sure, you know, we're supporting the Navy and we can get the money.
Thank you. That was a great question. I think
Yeah,
that
it
opened up
was.
some opportunities that others may not have seen, at least on the
Mhm.
government side.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Is the change of needing a standalone contract for the Mentor Protege program causing any potential interruptions or have any potential MBC OSBP reps been briefed on how to get the potential Mentor Protege program in place?
So the change of, say it again, the change of standalone contracts, was that the question?
Yeah, is the change of needing a standalone contract for the Mentor Protege program causing any potential interruptions?
Okay, so I will say this, the Center of Excellence is brand new. Is it causing interruptions? No. The having and having the standalone contracts is actually more of a positive than the way that the Navy used to do it before. Previously, the mentor had to have a contract with the Navy that the subcontractor was on or that their protege was on, and then we had to add a CLIN. So even if the work that you were doing wasn't supporting a particular command, you had to have that relationship on contract in order to participate with the Mentor Protege program. Now, by us doing these standalone contracts, as the previous question was asked, the mentor can start this relationship with someone who they may not have a subcontracting contract with initially with this standalone contract, and they can start working together in order to get them there. So the Center of Excellence is new, so it's taking us a little bit of time to kind of understand and make sure that we're understanding and making sure that we're doing everything positive on our end, following rules and regulations, of course, with contracting and things of that nature. But ultimately, having this standalone contract and this Center of Excellence is going to work out better for the Mentor Protege program and the different goals that we want to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next question. Can your office provide assistance setting up a program with a prime?
So as I mentioned before, we don't necessarily try to mix the proteges or mate the proteges and the prime. Proteges and mentors, because we want that relationship to be organic. What we do have is on our website, we have previous or past mentor protege agreements that show the primes and the proteges. And we encourage people to look out to there, and you can kind of reach out to those mentors and see if they're interested in doing another mentor protege program, another mentor protege agreement. I believe DOD also has that on their websites, so you can kind of see the mentors that were there before, and even some of the proteges that have potentially graduated. We love to see proteges that have graduated to become mentors, and they're now bringing along the next class of small businesses. But we do have the information out there for previous participants in the program, but we do not match them up because we want that relationship to kind of be organically grown.
Thank you very much. Next question. Please clarify, is a protege required to participate in Project Spectrum in parallel with the tasking of the approved mentor protege agreement? And then there's a second part to the question, but we'll start with that one.
Okay, so a protege is not required to participate in Project Spectrum. However, if that protege wants any type of cybersecurity, cyber hygiene as a part of their mentor protege agreement, it will be through Project Spectrum. So Project Spectrum is what we call an added benefit to participating with the mentor protege agreement. Previously, of course, before Project Spectrum started, a part of the mentor protege, one of the tasking that companies would use would say, oh, we want to get, cybersecurity certified, or whatever the case may be. And the prime would work with the small business in getting them all of the cybersecurity and trying to train them, and looking at their systems and trying to prepare and help them as a part of the mentor protege agreement. And all of those costs were, of course, covered or reimbursed under the mentor protege agreement. Well, DOD has now set up, and we have a contract that's paid for, and anybody who participates in the mentor protege program can participate in Project Spectrum at no additional cost. And so it takes that burden off of the mentoring company. And it also gives the protege, now you're working hand in hand with DOD, who kind of knows what's going to be looked for when doing that cybersecurity compliance and certification. So you're kind of getting a double benefit, because now the money, or the part set of money that for your mentor protege agreement that would have been going to CMMC and cybersecurity compliance can now be used for something else. And you're also getting that DOD hand-holding coaching of what is expected to be cybersecurity certified. So no, you're not required. However, if a part of your mentor protege agreement, you want to do something cyber related, it will have to be through the Project Spectrum program.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. The next question was, were there any current participants, and how do people manage, or how do the teams manage concurrent taskings with both the agreement and the other Project Spectrum?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough that one of our current mentor protege agreements was selected for like the initial Project Spectrum program before it was even called Project Spectrum. I just had a meeting with her yesterday, and she said it was probably one of the best programs that she's had. As far as the time constraints and how they were able to do it, she had personnel, so I'm not sure how large her company is, but that kind of will play a part in it. And if it's maybe you need to kind of work on getting your small business to where it needs to be before you can do Project Spectrum, that's a conversation that we can have. And I can ask DOD if, okay, even when this company graduates out of the mentor protege program, can they, go back and get their Project Spectrum training? That's something that we can look at. But all of the participants, so we had one who started before, who was in the initial pilot program, and now all of my current mentor proteges are in the program, and they all said that it's been so helpful. The information that they're learning and the guidance that they're getting is way more than they expected, and they've been able to kind of juggle it. The mentor protege program doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, hey, you're dedicating all of this time, because if you're matched with a mentor who you're already working with, that's essentially going to just continue. So it's really only the additional 10 hours a week with the Project Spectrum that's kind of new when you're getting into the Mentor Protege program. So for the Mentor Protege program, they're about twice a year, I would say, where you have your program management review, where that is time that like you take out from working with your mentor. We all kind of get together and determine, how the agreement is going. But for the most part, you're already working with this mentor who you've already developed a relationship with. So you're not really having any additional time or seeing a time constraint because you've already been working together. You're just putting it formally together under an agreement, and helping to get some of those costs reimbursed, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What are some examples of production items that were listed in a previous slide under manufacturing?
So anything. We have circuit cards. We have people who contribute, pieces of, and I'm not really a technical person, so I don't want to, but like the nuts and bolts to a company that that builds the final radar system. So things of that nature. Anything that's tangible is what we consider manufacturing. So hopefully that answers the question. Hello, are we still here?
Next question.
Okay.
Oops, I'm sorry. It doesn't help
Next
when I don't
question for
unmute, does
Timothy.
it? I was talking away here. Okay, let's see. I-107 elements of a mentor-protege agreement state that if you were an employee of the mentor in the last 2 years, this disqualifies you from a mentor-protege program. Bottom line up front, I was a part-time on-call employee with this firm, but really only worked for a few weeks. Do I qualify or am I disqualified?
So you're now wanting to do a mentor protege agreement with a company that you used to work with, I think is what I'm understanding. So my first
Correct.
question.
It looks like they were only a part-time and they were on call. So it sounds like a minimal involvement, but legalistically, yes.
Okay, then legally, yes. My next question too is also, okay, did you just start your own business, or did this company that you were working for part-time, did they help you spin off? One of the biggest things we want to make sure is that the mentor does not have a piece or a stake in the protege, because that's like paying the mentor to mentor themselves. So that's really around, generally around the reasons of why we kind of have those in place. If you want to send me an email offline about the details of what it is that you do currently for your small business and what did you do for the previous business, that's something I can take, a more detailed look into. But for now, legally speaking, yes, the rules are, you have to be 2 years off. So we'll go with that. However, if you need to speak to me offline, and as a contracting officer, in my previous years, there are always, exceptions to some of the rules. So I can't go through every exception, but of course, if you have a specific example, that's something I can look at offline.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, next question. What is the typical time that it takes from application to Office of Small Business Programs until the award of the Mentor Protege program contract?
Okay. Okay, so it's tricky because everything kind of overlaps, but typically we say about so are we talking about from when you submit the proposal or when you want to do your introductory briefing? Because tentatively after your introductory briefing, you could get a tentative thumbs up, hey, you want to do your mentor protege agreement, and then you actually have to start the paperwork. So I will say it definitely goes quicker if my office is involved from the beginning, because we're aware of it. We've asked all of our questions up front. But typically I would say it takes about 6 to 9 months. And that's from proposal to submission to getting everything on contract, getting funds approved, making sure we're, we have to do our market research, J&As, things like that, because it is still ultimately still ends up being a standalone contract. So the process of getting the mentor protege approved through Don OSBP can be quick, but then once we get to the actual contract portion of it, that can take a little bit more time because we have to follow, of course, we're still following FAR rules when we're putting the contracts together.
Thank you very much. Okay, another question. Is the June 2020 Mentor Protege Program Guidebook the latest update? It currently contains no info on the CMMC Project Spectrum items discussed today. And then they want to know, where can they find the requirement info for how those items pertain to the Mentor Protege Program?
Okay, yes, June 2020 is the most recent one. We are in the process of updating the book now, so keep a lookout. However, for more information about Project Spectrum, just overall the Project Spectrum program in itself, it is Project Spectrum. Hold on, I want to make sure I give you the correct website, but I believe it's projectspectrum.io. Yes, Timothy. Yes, that's correct. So I think somebody just put in the chat it's projectspectrum.io. That is the website for Project Spectrum.
Let's see, I'm going to jump in only because there's another question that came in. Not directly for you today, but about the learning hours. Yes, if you are signed in, you are being tracked as to your learning participation, and that will be in consideration when the certificates for continuous learning points are issued. Okay, now I understand we have some questions over here in the chat as well. Let's see. Okay, is it required for the mentor to have a subcontracting plan in place for the contract they hold?
For the contract that they hold, you just need to have one subcontractor agreement in place. You wouldn't have a subcontract agreement in place for the standalone contract for the Mentor Protege Program, because essentially your contract is supporting a full small business. So you're not getting that subcontracting plan approved. It would be a subcontracting plan just showing that you work with other small businesses. So on any DoD contract, it doesn't even have to be a Navy specific contract. It can be, you have a DoD subcontract with Army, but you want to do the Mentor Protege agreement with the Navy. We just need to see that you have a subcontracting agreement with DoD, an approved subcontracting agreement.
Thank you. Okay, another great question here. Would the prime get small business credit if they subcontract with a mentor protege?
If they subcontract with a mentor protege, you would still have to submit your mentor protege agreement. But yes, that would be one of our credit mentor protege agreements, and DCMA handles all of that. So you could absolutely get subcontracting credit for assisting a small business. And you're saying when you subcontract the work to them, the work needs to kind of be in the assistance of the mentor protege type assistance. But if you can put together a mentor protege agreement, instead of it being reimbursable, if you already are working together and your company has already absolved all of those costs and you just want credit, you could definitely get credit towards assisting a small business that is one of your subcontractors.
Okay, thank you. David Waltz, did that answer your question adequately, or did you have more questions from that? Meanwhile, I'm going to jump.
I got it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. All righty. Next question, is there ever an exception for the mentor to hold a subcontracting plan in the event that they are much larger than the protege, but still technically a small business?
Is there an exception for the mentor to hold a what?
Let's see, let's try this one again. Is there
Okay.
ever an exception for the mentor to hold a subcontracting plan in the event that they are a much larger, let's see, they are much larger than the protege, but they are still technically a small business? So it sounds like a small business mentoring
Okay.
another small business.
Got it. Okay. Yes. And yes, that is possible. It would just have to, like I said before, there are in sometimes there are exceptions to the rules. Yes, if you are if you're still considered a small business, but you want to mentor another small business through the mentor protege program, my office in that company would need to have conversations to ensure that that small business could actually impart the wisdom. But if it's a small business mentoring a small business, you would not have a subcontracting plan, or you would not be held to the requirements of having a subcontracting plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question. Just to confirm, those that are strictly certified as small businesses and no other categories do not qualify to be proteges.
That is correct, not unless they would fall under the last bullet, which is an entity providing goods or services in a private sector critical to enhancing DoD supplier base. There is no real true definition of what that is. That is, you just have to convince myself and DoD that the goods or services that you're providing is critical to the DoD supplier base. So that would be the only way around it. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, the Mentor Protege program was initially established because prime contractors were having a hard time reaching those other socioeconomic categories, such as the small disadvantaged businesses, the woman-owned, and things like that. So that's where the Mentor Protege agreement kind of came in place.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I think this one was already answered, but I'll just run by it again. I missed the cyber portion. So MPP covers the CMMC cost incurred.
So MPP will put you through Project Spectrum for free. So Project Spectrum will, based off of what I've heard, I because I don't have a business, I've never gone through the Project Spectrum, but what my proteges are telling me is you get a coach who goes in and kind of reviews your software, finds, your errors and things of that nature, and gives you, hey, this is what you need to do to be CMMC certified or compliant, in works, and give you that guidance on what you need to do. Do they cover the cost of your software? To my knowledge, no. But if there is something that comes out of that, it is a potential that what may come out of that could be put on the Mentor Protege agreement as a reimbursable cost.
Okay, I think we might have wrapped it up for a minute. Let's see.
Okay.
Oh, okay, just a second. I've got it. I should rephrase. Will they certify you?
Project Spectrum will not certify you. They will get you to the step right before certification. So they will make sure, and essentially we have a partnership with the certifiers, who they will bring a certifier in to certify you. So you're basically kind of getting a pre-certified, but then you still have to go through the official certification. But you shouldn't have any problems when you get there, because you've had an unofficial certifier come in and review your system, if that makes sense.
Okay, and then I've got one more follow-up. It says level 4 question mark.
Level 4 CMMC certification. Is that the question?
I think so. Let's see. Would government consider paying those costs by the third party for final certification? And yes, level 4 certification.
That's something I would definitely have to go back and talk to DOD about. As I mentioned before, they have requested now that we've taken all cyber, CMMC type costs out of the mentor protege agreements because we have Project Spectrum. But I'm sure in developing your mentor protege agreement in the proposal, we could have that discussion, and I could easily reach out to my DOD counterparts and see what type of restrictions or kind of things they have in place for us to actually get that those costs approved, or if it's even on the table. So for now, I would say no, those costs are not covered. But again, if you want to have further conversation, feel free to reach out to my office.
Okay. Oh, and now we've got a couple more questions that popped in. Are we able to see the listing of all the small businesses that certified in the Mentor Protege program?
A listing. So our Department of Navy, we have a list on our website of previous primes and protege, so previous who participated in the program. A list of all small businesses, I don't have access, like without me going through my federal accounts. I don't have that access to give to the public. But if you're interested in who's participated in the program before, Department of Navy does have a list of their previous participants.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one more comment here. It would make sense if you're getting CMMC level compliance, they would pay those costs to ensure all contractors are adhering. Thanks for inquiring. Okay, if anyone else has additional questions, you can include it into the chat box, the question answer portion, and we'll make sure that it gets to the presenters or the panelists for answering the questions. Do we have the slide up with Ms. Mercedes' email address? Oh, there it is. Perfect. If I close that box.
And if I can say one more thing, because I think somebody just put something in the chat about the SBA's group. SBA has a listing of active mentor proteges. The SBA program is completely different from the Department of Defense mentor protege program. So there are two mentor protege programs out there. And the one that I discussed with you today is the DOD's version of it. So please keep that in mind when you're looking at the SBA's mentor protege program. SBA has a completely different mentor protege program that the Navy will ultimately, I think later on this year, we're going to be doing a webinar to kind of discuss those differences, but keep that in mind that there are two particular mentor protege agreements out there.
Thank you. Yes, that is a very good point, because I know even in Army, we get those questions sometimes, and it's not a one size fits all. Each one is a little bit different.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very, very much. This was very informative and very helpful. It truly was a pleasure to have you present. I hope you'll join us again.
Definitely.
I'm going to pause for a little bit. We will take our lunch break. Those of us that have attended in person know that about this point in time, the doors would open and we would go off to a wonderful buffet lunch. So I guess we'll open our own doors and go into our own kitchens and make our own lunch. And then we'll come back in about 30 minutes. So at straight up on the hour. So I guess it's 24 minutes, we'll be back. Thank you very much. Welcome back. It's 12 o'clock out here on the Pacific Northwest. I'm sure it's 1 o'clock some places, 2 and 3, and It might even be 9 o'clock in the morning for some of our friends far west of us. I'm going to give us just another minute or so to gather back in, and then I will launch into the introduction for our next speaker. Okay, getting ready to come back. We have a wonderful opportunity this time. We get to hear from the United States Air Force Small Business Program. This is first time in a while that we've had the Air Force come and visit, and I'm really honored to have you join us today. We have Mr. Joseph McWilliams, and it says he goes by Mike. He is the Director of Staff Director of Staff, Resource Manager, and Small Business Acquisition Program Manager in the Air Force Office of Small Business Programs located in the Pentagon. The Department of the Air Force Office of Small Business Programs, he oversees daily the strategic headquarters, small business operations, policy, and strategic planning to include strategic planning, support, and operations of the United States Space Force Small Business Program. He also provides program oversight for all small business education and outreach programs. Let's see, the acquisition program management is coordinated with the program executive offices, or the PEOs, Air Force, and major commands to ensure small business participation is maximized. Mike McWilliams served Mike McWilliams served 27 years active duty in the United States Air Force. Throughout his career, he has held other key positions to include commander and instructor for nuclear weapons operations, manufacturing program manager, chief of Air Force acquisition policy and DoD acquisition policy, deputy director, F-35 logistics support products, deputy director, F-35 weapons systems integration. It is truly an honor to have Mr. McWilliams share information with us today. Please welcome Mr. McWilliams. Let's see. I can see you, and I can see your mic is unmuted. Jeremy, would you maybe be able to step in and assist for just a moment?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so Mr. McWilliams, could you please go down to your microphone and click that up arrow and select the correct microphone? You might be selected on the wrong one. And if that doesn't work, you can also try connecting your audio via phone. And you might also try disconnecting and reconnecting if that doesn't work.
See, I can see that the mic is off, but the sound isn't coming through. I'm wondering, should we migrate over to the panel discussion while we get Mr. McWilliams' audio taken care of?
So I think the best course of action for you is to disconnect and then reconnect, if you can do that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Great.
Yeah, I'm on the phone, so sorry about that. Let me make sure that the computer is turned off.
Welcome. We're glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and apologize for that. You can't still hear me, right?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. And now the screen's gone out. But anyway, I'll talk on the slides. First of all, thank you for that introduction. And if anyone can't hear me, please let me know because I'm talking from the phone. Had a good dry run yesterday and everything seemed to work, and I don't know what happened today. But anyway, thank you for inviting us. I didn't realize it had been so long since the Air Force had participated. So thank you for inviting us. I am the Director of Staff of the Air Force Small Business Office. What was provided there in the introduction pretty much gives me pretty much says I'm pretty much a jack of all trades in the office. I do a lot of the outreach. The director and the deputy director, on behalf of them, I have to say they send their regrets they couldn't be here, but we've got so many things going on. And our office, we've lost so many people within the last year. So we're stretched pretty thin and trying to make sure we still cover our outreach events among this COVID situation. I'm going to start off with the slide, the second slide, which says, what is a small business program? I just wanted to footstep. Let me make sure everybody can still hear me, correct?
Absolutely, yes. You're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, good. I want to start off and just kind of footstep what is a small business program. And when I go out and speak, this is one thing I like to remind all the companies out there, large and small, and how we look at small businesses, you know, as a resource for innovation, agility, and affordability. And those three words are key And those 3 words are key because they align us with the National Defense Strategy and Air Force priorities, whether you're prime, subcontractor, or doing this subcontracting plan. It's future competition, established future competitions for us, and it's a choice for decision makers in the warfighting community. Informs and our requirements and for our decision makers. And the bottom line there is for an industrial-based development program, pretty much the same things. Consists of large and small businesses, develop future sources for government requirements, create strategy and requirements that generate competition. Let me say right off the bat, I was listening at the last briefing and they had a lot of contact information there. For contacting us, and I'll repeat this again at the end of the brief, you can just Google Air Force Small Biz with a Z, and our website will come up and all our contact information is there. We should have put it on the slide, but we didn't put it as the last part of the slide. One of the other things too is that we have we have 160 small business professionals out in the field that will help you with information and things like this. I saw in the chat, some of our folks are out there, especially from the Air Force Test Center. So thank you for joining. I've got some of our folks on from the office listening in as well and taking notes. So next slide, please. So the Department of the Air Force uses prime and subcontracting strategies to most efficiently serve the defense needs of the country and our warfighters. Major contracts are awarded to large and small prime contractors, and we have thousands of related contracts for labor, manufacturing, supply, and other needs are coordinated through agreements between the prime and its partners through subcontracting agreements. In our office, we have a subcontracting specialist. I am not the subcontracting specialist. I am actually also stepping in for her because of other priorities. But we do have a specialist in the office if you need additional information, and I'll try to give you as much information as I can, or at least take it back to her and get back with you. The subcontracting plan for contracts and modifications are greater than $750K or $1.5 million in construction. If you'll see a little chart down there you'll see the trend up to FY20 in terms of our small business goals. And then for FY21, what our small business subcontracting goals are, okay? And for more information, you can go to the Small Business Administration's website there to Subnet, and a wealth of opportunities there, first and foremost, and then as well as beta.sam, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. So primes are often mandated to complete a portion of their prime contracts using small businesses. Small businesses can find information on the private subcontract outreach events, notices of source of salt, and solicitations for subcontractor work, as I mentioned on the SBA subcontracting database subnet, which is listed there at the bottom of the screen. Next chart, please. So how much do we spend? So if you look at this chart, you'll see there, we're looking at FY19, FY20. In the Air Force, we have actually increased small business opportunities in prime and subcontracting. In FY19, first bullet, FY20, Air Force awarded, you'll see the award amount there in prime contracts, of which 22.79% was awarded to small business of the Air Force spend there. In FY19, you'll see the dollars there, which only 19% of the 19.58% of the total spend was awarded to small business. So we're on the increase there. With respect to subcontracting dollars, same thing on the last two bullets. The reported total Air Force spend in subcontracted dollars was 20.8%, previous year 20%. So wasn't that much, but in terms of where we're headed, we're on the rise. And I will tell you, I mean, no guarantees with anything, but I will tell you that we are keeping a close eye on how this last year is impacting small businesses. We are part of a joint task force internally that briefs and reviews every week how small businesses are doing and contributing to Air Force in general, as well as the COVID situation. And and ensuring that with all this impact on small businesses, that we are making sure that our small businesses are getting as much opportunity as possible. Okay, next chart. So where are we going with respect to the subcontracting opportunities? The Air Force Small Business Program and Air Force professionals, like I say, there's 160 of them out there in the field. We want you to use them. We oversee the entire Air Force, Department of the Air Force Small Business Program. And a change within the last year with the stand-up of Space Force, okay, separate service. However, if you haven't noticed, I use the term Department of the Air Force, just like the Navy, Department of the Navy, because we are supporting space. We don't know how long, but we are supporting space. And the small business under space will be supported by our office. I briefed that up the chain within the last 6 months, and we had approval. We've actually added additional bodies to our office, and we're looking at strategic locations out in the field for supporting the Space Force. So there are a lot of opportunities there. I'm already getting contract awards, subcontracting, as well as prime opportunities from our space directors out in the field, getting those daily. As a matter of fact, it's been interesting to see how those have increased. So stay connected with our office, contact our office for additional information. We'll either put you in touch with the right small business director in the field for either prime opportunities or subcontracting opportunities. And then you can go from there working with the right PLCs. As I was saying about our Air Force small business professionals, we will continue to participate in market research and acquisition strategies to ensure maximum opportunity for the small businesses. On acquisitions where there is no small business capability to be the prime contractor and meet the subcontracting plan threshold, the small business professional advises contracting officers to include small business participation in source selection as an evaluation criteria. That way we ensure that small businesses are getting an opportunity. Says OSD has not signed its subcontracted goals and FY20 data is not available at this time. The goal that for FY19, we had achieved 38.6 in excess of the 32% goal in small business contracting. I think on the previous chart, I noticed at the last minute, we did have a FY21 32.25% goal, and I'll need to confirm that. So I think that has already been provided. Next chart, please. What are some of the challenges as far as subcontracting, collecting data and reporting? And if you're probably already familiar with the electronic subcontracting reporting system that is part of the President's management agenda for electronic government. It is developed to collect subcontracting accomplishment. This internet-based tool streamlines the process of reporting on subcontracting plans and provides agencies with access to analytical data on subcontracting performance. Specifically, the ESRS eliminates the need for paper submissions and replaces the paper with an easy-to-use electronic process to collect the data. So that's helped us improve in terms of data collection. Now, even though we have met our goals in the past years, there's always room for improvement. The small business contractor can help us. The small business subcontractors can help us by responding to our sources sought in betasam.gov. Even if you cannot perform the entire performance work statement, just let us know what part of the performance work statement you can do. This helps government in identifying government opportunities. Also, small business contractors should review the subnet that I've mentioned earlier from the SBA. And often the Small Business Administration bridges the gap between businesses seeking small business and small businesses seeking contracting opportunities. I run into this a lot out into the field when I'm doing outreach events. I'm generally asked, where are the opportunities for prime contracting? And if there aren't, what other opportunities are there? And I always put stop subcontracting, because if you're new and you're not aware, it at least gets you in the door. You could wind up competing against the prime, but it will at least get you in the door and start getting your record established. If you are subcontracting already, I think you already understand that. But if you're brand new to the game and having and trying to break in, subcontracting is a great opportunity to get out there, and it helps. It's almost like a mentoring opportunity for you when becoming the prime for government contracts. Okay. Responding to source of SART, I wanted to foot stomp that a few minutes. I get a lot of feedback on betasam.gov, consistently told that by the time it gets there, it's too late. And I adamantly disagree with that. Part of my background, I'm not a contracting officer, which most small businesses are. I'm a program manager where I had a couple of programs throughout my military career and early in my civilian career. I do not necessarily believe it's too late by the time it reaches betasam. There is opportunity when we are there looking for primes or subcontractors. We're trying to see what's out there and who's out there, and it gives us the opportunity to either reshape our acquisition strategy to ensure that there's participation, or what portion of the performance work statement can be performed by a small business or a subcontractor. Yeah. So, all right. Next chart, please. Okay, the DoD, one of the big contributors to the government meeting our subcontracting goal is the DoD Comprehensive Subcontracting Test Program. This test program expires in December 31st, 2027. The DoD has established this test program to determine whether comprehensive subcontracting plans on a corporate, division, or plant-wide basis will reduce administrative burdens while enhancing subcontractor opportunities for small and small disadvantaged business concerns. Contractors eligible to participate in the test program are large business concerns that during the preceding fiscal year were A, performing under at least 3 DoD prime contracts, B, furnish supplies or services, including professional services to DoD, C, were paid $5 million or more for such contract activities, and D, achieve a small disadvantaged business, that's SDB, subcontracting participation rate of 5% or more during the preceding fiscal year. In FY19, there were 9 companies that participated in the CSP program. This test program was a time and manpower saver with reviewing our comprehensive subcontracting plan report annually, instead of 2 individual sub-reports per each government contract for the company. So this was a great incentive for companies to participate in achieving their subcontracting goals. And again, that chart is just a repeat of earlier where you see the trend from 2018 to 2019 for small business in general, and where we exceeded those in 2019, and hopefully to get on track and achieve again this year. So if a contractor is interested in getting involved with the Air Force, next chart. If you are interested in getting involved with the subcontracting program with the Air Force, you must respond to our source of SART and betasam. And I can't foot stomp that enough, because I am surprised at the number of contractors and subcontractors that I would run into the field who felt that, again, betasam, by the time it was there, was too late, and they said, what's the point of responding? Or even more blatantly, that we've already picked the contractor we want to pick, and of course we can't do that, and we don't do that. So respond to the source of SART and betasam. Review the subcontracting system, the subnet from the SBA. Contact the small business liaison officers for the DoD subcontracting test program participants, who also should be able to help you in the primes, and as well as contacting our office. Like I said, you can go to our Air Force Small Business website, and we have a link there that will allow you to ask questions or send in a question. We have so much time to respond to you. and get the information that you need. And we have a ton of information on the Air Force website. So with that, I think that's all I have on the subcontracting program. Open for questions. Pretty short, brief, and again, apologize that we couldn't have the primary POC here, but I'll try to answer some questions or take those questions back and get back with the community on them.
Okay, thank you very, very much. We have our first question from
Okay.
Aaron O'Brien. We are very interested in providing services to Space Force. I know you briefly mentioned this, but what is the best way to get in touch with the proper small business contacts?
For why, again, if you go to our website, and I put something on our website because we put a ton of information out there, we want folks to use it. There should be a link there for you to submit a question like you just asked, and I can give you that point of contact for both Denver, not Denver, I'm sorry, for both Colorado, Boulder, and for the Air Force LA Air Station. So we have 2 contacts out there, and I can give you those contacts.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the field? Either in the Q&A or in the chat?
Let me give you let me go ahead and, since it's not on the chart, give you my email, and that whoever asked that question can email me directly, okay? And then I'll make sure that we do respond to them. So my email is joseph.mcwilliams, the number 1, at us.af.mil, M-I-L. That's joseph.mcwilliams, the number 1, at us.af.mil. And I can provide you that information on points of contact or refer you to the website. Yeah, I would request that if you do email me, put in the subject line, where you're emailing me from, that we were at this regional council meeting, so that it'll jog my memory. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, looks like going once, going twice. I hear somebody up. I see a question popped up. Okay, here we go. Some of the solicitations require secret clearance, but you can't get a secret clearance unless you have a secret clearance. Is the only way to get a secret clearance to subcontract with a prime that has it? And even then, a lot of the time contractors require you already have it.
Yeah, it's what we've said is a catch-22. Look, here's what I like to do. Whoever asked that question, if you got my email, we put together a brochure for facility clearances that helps try to answer that question directly from the source. So if you email me, put in the subject line, and I just don't have it in front of me, put in the subject line the subject about the secret clearance or the facility clearance. I will email you that brochure we put together. We kept getting this question a lot in the field, just as they characterize it there, that it's pretty much a catch-22 situation. And we got the information directly from DISA, and I will send that to you, okay, with the proper points of contact in that brochure.
Thank you. That's an excellent question and an
Yeah.
excellent answer. Thank you. Any other questions out there? Hey. Up just a second. I think I see another one. All righty. It says, what is the email address again, please?
Okay, let me try to give it again. Joseph.mcwilliams, the number 1, at us.af.mil, MIL.
And I think when we send out the slides, I think we'll be able to possibly add that information to the slides so that folks will have that.
Okay, yeah, or I can have a updated slide with the contact information sent to Jeremy.
Perfect, perfect. And someone else said, up, looks like someone just put it into the chat window. Maybe you can look at the chat window real quick and confirm that that's correct.
That's it. Got it.
Perfect. Teamwork. All righty. Okay, are there any other outstanding questions? Great opportunity. Asking the Air Force. We don't get this every single day.
Yeah, and even if it's not subcontracting, again, feel free to go to our website or email me. If I don't answer you directly, I'll at least be pointing you to the website and the right information. But anything you have with the Air Force or space small business can help you.
All righty. Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your help with this and your participation. It's an honor to have you join us today. Yeah, I look forward to having you join us again in the future.
Okay, well, thank you. And sorry for the stumble earlier. Thank you.
Oh, you know, those things happen to all of us. I think you could probably safely say that most people on this call today have had some adventures when we've been trying to do something virtual. So welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Pardon me, Kay. So we have someone who's on their phone who has their hand raised, and I can allow them to ask their question. It's Michael Aziz.
Absolutely, please.
I'm sorry, that was an error. Please disregard. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine. Yep. No worries.
That was an error. Please disregard.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let's see. We're rolling into our panel session. Can I just get a raised hand from our panel participants if you're about ready to go ahead and start? And if so, I'll go roll out the introduction. And thank you, Mr. McWilliams, for participating. We really appreciate your time.
Hi, Kay, it's Mike Homer. I do not know how to raise my hand, so I'm here.
It's Vanessa. Same boat. I don't know how to raise my hand either. I'm ready.
I'm not the only one.
Exactly.
Okay, well then, in that case, I'll go ahead and roll right on into our introductions as soon as I get that page back up here. 1 second. Let's see. We have a panel discussion this afternoon, and it includes our own Dave Waltz. He's a small business professional with NAVSEA, located at Naval Undersea Warfare Center, Division Keyport in Washington State in the Kitsap Peninsula. His career started in the Air Force, and then he rolled into the civilian service. And he and I started together in contracting at Keyport, Washington, a couple of years ago. We shared cubicles right next to each other. And let me tell you, he's got a he's very skilled at making paper airplanes and shooting rubber bands. Just a little details there. And then another one of our members is Vanessa. Is it Gleach?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. And she is the outstanding program manager for the Native PTAC. And the Native PTAC that she is the program manager for is quite sizable. It covers California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And I also want to draw the attention that because of she and Jeremy, we have this platform today. They are tremendous support at our being able to host this virtual event. So thank you very, very much. And then our third panel member is Mike Homer. Mike is an industrial security and compliance senior manager at M.A. Mortensen Company, a leader in the construction industry with a dedicated market sector group focused specifically on federal construction projects. Mike is responsible for Mortensen's industrial security program, the small business utilization program, and the All Smalls SBA Mentor Protege program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panel. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
David? Go ahead, David.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. As Kay said, my name is David Walls, and I am the Deputy for Small Business at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, located in Keyport, Washington. And if you're not familiar with this area, Keyport is just west of Seattle across the Puget Sound, just north of Bremerton, Washington. And I've been in this position for about 5 years now. And prior, I was in contracts. And like Kay said, we were, cube mates. I wasn't proficient at paper airplanes. They did crash a lot, but my rubber band shooting skills were pretty good. Anyway, like I said, I've been in this position for about 4 or 5 years. As a deputy for small business, outreach is, one of our main aspects of our job. And, typically we love to do our outreach in person because with that outreach, a lot of relationships can be formed, of course, with the small business professional, but also with technical and engineering personnel, as well as a face-to-face conversation with contracts in some of the events that we attend. But because of COVID, we've had to do things a little bit different. And so we have had to do things virtual. I was able to host a industry day back in June, and we did it virtual. We were planning on doing it in person. And then there was talks because of the COVID and the shutdowns of just canceling altogether. But we have a commanding officer at Newark Keyport who is very much pro small business, and he wanted us to go forward with it. And when I say small business, I know I'm talking to an audience of large businesses, and so when I'm saying small business, it's how we can help small business. And of course, with the large business, we're also, looking out to how we can help you as well to meet your small business goals. So we went ahead and we were able to do our industry day via a virtual platform. We did it a little bit different. We were able to do it instead of having one long 6-hour event, we were able to break it up into 6 one-hour lunchtime, brown paper bag type events. We partnered with PTAC, our local PTAC up here in Washington State. They provided the Zoom platform because at that time they had a Zoom platform that we could at least get 500 people to attend. And so, it worked out perfect. We were able to host the event without any glitches. In fact, the events are posted on the Newark Keyport YouTube page if anybody wants to go back and watch them. But anyway, with PTAC support, them hosting, providing that platform, we were able to continue with that. Moving forward, with the pandemic and everybody working from home, the Navy was able to, provide Microsoft Teams. And it's not just the Navy. I know DoD, we're all using Microsoft Teams. And that allows me to continue to do my outreach events, such as my one-on-one meetings with companies, where I can have that personal face-to-face meet and greet with those companies. But I also host a monthly outreach event called Wednesdays with the Deputy for Small Business. So with that, it's, I was able to advertise via PTAC and also advertise via Beta SAM, the event. And we are able to continue outreach that way. And those events, I typically give a background of what we do at Keyport. I always provide upcoming opportunities, whether it's something that's posted on beta.sam or on Seaport. And I also team with other small business professionals. So right down the road from my location is Miss Brenda Lancaster, who's with the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. So she's, hosts with me. She's a co-host. But then I also have someone from the Northwest Tech Bridge, part of Naval X, who shares about how Tech Bridge can help companies that are more on the R&D side, as well as someone from contracts. We have somebody from our contracts department, policy department, come on and help out with kind of like do's and don'ts, best tips when they're submitting their contracts. And then every once in a while, I'll have deputies for small business from other NAVSEA warfare centers or shipyards come in whenever they have requirements that they want to share with the businesses. So, the virtual platform is great. We have a great partnership with PTAC. Like I said, they helped with our virtual industry day, and they help me monthly with my my monthly event through advertising. And then they also participate in doing an introduction on what PTAC can do to help companies. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I could continue to go on, but I know there's other panel members who want to share. But anyway, outreach continues at Newark Keyport. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Let me put my camera on. Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Gleich. I'm the program manager for the one of the Native American PTACs. So just as David had mentioned, we are a resource to you, to help you send out your outreach events, advertisements. If you're looking for small businesses, especially if you have sources sought notices posted, we receive those from agencies. And what they do is we send it out to our businesses, just notifying them that there is a source sought notice and how to respond. Because a lot of times small businesses don't look at beta.sam because it's sometimes confusing or just trying to identify opportunities. One outreach event that we've worked with is DOT, Department of Transportation, in their outreach event, just letting them know how to work with PTACs and exactly what it is that we do, especially for their certification program. But also part of that, because tribes, there's highways that run through reservations, we will invite different tribes to participate because we do have businesses that are wanting to work with tribes. They are a government, a form of government, tribal government. So there is a process in working, with those tribal nations. The other thing is that we work with primes, large primes, to host events, especially if they're have subcontract opportunities. They may have matchmaking or just letting them know what subcontract opportunities they have. And we work with other PTACs. Just as David had mentioned, they had an outreach event and the state PTAC invited us to participate. just so that businesses know that the different tax that are in the area. And then of course we have other PTACs from other states that also participate. So it's a collaborative participation that we have from all PTACs and with agencies. And the biggest thing that I can say is that if you're looking for small businesses, especially to fulfill your small business goals, PTACs are a good resource to you, because at least we work with the businesses and we can identify, potential subcontractors that may fit that particular requirement, have the capability and the financial capacity to perform. So we're a resource not only to agencies and large primes, but also, and to small businesses. So it's something that should, we work with everybody that that there is, and we are a federally funded program. Some PTACs, have a nominal charge, for matchmaking or for bid matching. Our PTAC, there is no fee to receive our services. So if you have a business that is having a process or having an issue with payment, or they don't understand, maybe the registration in SAM has expired, we can help those businesses. It just makes, your life a little bit easier. Or if you're trying to validate something that's in SAM, we can definitely help you in that capacity. And we're always open to working with agencies. Just as David had mentioned, we have a platform to help you, with outreach. And it's free to anybody who, wants to tune in to these opportunities. But I think that's pretty much everything that I have. And, at the end, we'll go ahead and we do have a website, which is aptac-us.org. And you can also go to the DoD website and find the closest PTAC in your area. And if not, you can always email us and we can provide you that information as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. Jeremy, do you have my briefing? You can go to the next slide. So in preparing for this panel, I was kind of looking at case studies on kind of what COVID did to the outreach events that we were a part of. And I looked at it both at a geographic level. So I looked at our Denver office, and they've been in that industry for decades now, and how they kind of adjusted to the virtual outreach. And then I looked at a project specific, an area that we were new to the market, and what did outreach look like there as well. And there's a lot of things that we've done or did post-COVID that didn't really change, but there are some pretty unique things that kind of came out of this. So next slide. We're going to look at the source list, how we kind of reached out to that small business community, how we invited them to our outreach event, which was purely virtual. What kind of platforms did we use for those outreach events? We used different platforms based on that geographic location. And then what was the process? How did that outreach look as we were doing it virtually? So the first case, next slide, is going to be our Denver office case. You can go to the next slide. So we've been in Denver for a number of decades, and we've already kind of built this robust source list, but we're always trying to find new small businesses. And doing that really hasn't changed much. We use PTAC, we use partners, trade partner associations, government source lists, client lists, things of that nature. And then we also have portals on our website that the small business community can come into and register to get on the bid solicitation list in that geographic location. Some of our unique practices is, I'd like to introduce you to Allie. She is our community engagement professional. She is full-time in Denver. Her focus is to be that liaison between the small business community and Mortenson. So she is really diving deep into that community, getting to know that community, and helping assist that community up through into the Mortenson to get those particular projects. One thing she did is she took our community participation program, it's a written document, and posted that to our website. And so all small business community members can see exactly what we are committing to do. And we commit to certain goals on all projects, not just federal or local government projects, but every single project that we're a part of, we want to have an associated small business participation goals tagged to that as well. And then additional to that, what Allie does is she does this coffee with the contractor, similar to what Dave does on his end, where on a monthly basis, we're meeting with the small business community in a smaller setting, maybe 10 folks. And Allie will bring in project managers or estimators that are kind of specialized for that particular need for that small business and just kind of talk. And that's how we kind of continue the relationship rather than just having an outreach event and kind of stopping there. So this is a way of kind of continuing on with that relationship. Next slide. So when we're trying to reach out to the community, we use a couple different events or platforms, I should say, in this case. We used Event Create, which is a website-based platform. You can use it for advertising of your event, communicating to your audience through that website. And it also kind of manages your registration as folks start to sign up for that event. Internally, we have this Build It Connected program that is our source list. And that's where we kind of house all of our subcontractors that we are going to send invitation to bids for. So that's kind of our main source list. We kind of feed that list to Event Create to invite folks to attend our event. We also use social media. I'll show you that on the next slide. And something that's kind of unique that this group did was they actually sent out surveys prior to the outreach to just kind of find out what the community is looking for and what kind of questions they may have. And so we can prepare for those questions at our outreach event. So that worked out very well. Next slide. So this is what Event Create looks like. It is a web-based program, and you can communicate all kinds of information, who the hosts are, kind of what the overview of that event is, and then they can go ahead and sign right up for that event in Event Create. Next slide. Here is our social media platforms around this same event. And what the social media event platform does, it tries to drive people back to Event Create to get them to register for this event. So trying to communicate in a number of different platforms. Next slide. And then I talked about that survey that we sent out. We sent that out prior to the outreach event so we can collect those questions and get prepared for those. And then afterwards, we had a post-event survey, how do we do? And then we kind of listed that out on our presentation. Next slide. During the actual event, we had to switch platforms because we had a pretty high registration rate. And Kay, looking at this conference, we have 151 participants right now. And I think that's the most I think we've ever seen at this event. Usually when I'm here in person, been coming to this event for almost 10 years now, we get what, 60, 70 participants. So what we're seeing here in this event, we were also seeing with our virtual event. Attendance was absolutely going up through the roof. And I think it was just because of the convenience of it. And so we had to kind of switch our platform and go to the GoToMeeting and then that SurveyMonkey feature after that outreach event. Next slide. Things that were important to us that we were able to achieve, we wanted to introduce our team. We wanted to make sure that the small business community could also ask questions and we could give them immediate feedback. And we did that similar to this event here, where it was through the comment feature. And then things that were still important to us, but we weren't able to achieve is that face-to-face interaction. And you're probably feeling that now as well, where you just don't have that setting where you're having that personal interaction and the whole networking piece. Next slide. So during our outreach event, here's kind of some of the slides that we presented. Next slide. And here's the nearest point. So Allie kind of was the MC of our outreach event. And so similar to the way you can see me talk, she would come up on the screen with our presentation and she would be introducing folks from across our operating group in these different teams. So business development, accounting. She would basically hand off the event, it'd go to accounting, that person would come up on the screen, they would do their presentation, and then Allie was kind of behind the scenes collecting the questions and then immediately answering those questions during the event. Next slide. Another thing we did is we kind of put a point of contact depending on what kind of work that subcontractor may do. Here is our initial contacts that those individuals should be in touch with. Next slide. And then the coffee with the contractor. Now, Ali's been doing this for a long time. It has become virtual, but it's still a good way to kind of keep that relationship going once we do our initial outreach events. It just kind of continues that relationship. Next slide. Now we're going to go to a job-specific outreach. So this is our Nashville Major League Soccer Stadium project. Next slide. Again, this was a new market for Mortenson. We haven't done work in this market, so we had to kind of redevelop or start from scratch when it came to our source list and what's the small business community look like out there. We did this through a joint venture. Messer Construction is a local firm out there that we joint ventured with, and they had a pretty robust diversity supplier list that we could utilize, as well as the other standard trade partner associations, government sources. What we did in this case is we actually stood up a project-specific website that we could drive the small business community to actually register for the work. And then we actually had a partnership with our client who allowed us to even utilize their website because they're trying to drive the word out that the soccer stadium's coming, and they were trying to sell tickets and get events going. We kind of piggybacked onto that as well with their support to also kind of drive small businesses and also the diverse workforce piece on this project. Next slide. So here's Carol. I'd like to introduce you to Carol. She did a fantastic job. She's with Messer Construction, and she was a dedicated inclusion plan coordinator for this project. And she was really deeply rooted into that community, which was fantastic, because you can throw all this technology out there you want, but if you don't have that personal connection, it really doesn't go anywhere. So some unique practices on that website. We had this community engagement piece or portal, and small businesses could actually sign up and register to bid on that project. And we also opened that up to the workforce. So if you were someone in the workforce interested in working on that project, you could also register through the same portal. And we would try to steer that individual to the right trade or subcontracting company to actually perform work out there. So really good platform set up there. Next slide. The customer's website, they actually built kind of this project team spotlight feature within their website as this project was progressing. And Carol was one of our spotlights that we did that kind of reached out more further to that small business community. So we're trying to hit them in different locations in different ways just to get the excitement about this project. So they did a nice job doing write-ups on that. And they also had links from their website to the project-specific website if those companies wanted to register to bid on some work out there. Next slide. So the invitation, the bid process, really not much of a change post-COVID or prior to COVID. We use that same Building Connected to kind of get the word out, and we also used Eventbrite to invite and manage that whole registration piece of our outreach event. And we had multiple outreach events on this project based on the bid packages that were being built. And then, of course, the most important thing was it was Carol, right? It was her background and her deeply rooted embedment into that community. There's no technology that can, and it's not supposed to be replay, it's supposed to be replace. So I apologize for the typo here. When my mother, when I was younger, used to read my reports where I didn't get a very good grade, she'd just kind of shake her head and say, "I'm glad you're good at math because you're not very good at spelling." So she was instrumental in providing that knowledge of the community and really getting our source list and getting the businesses to that project. Next slide. So here's a kind of a snapshot of what that Eventbrite invitation looks like, where they can register for these events. Next slide. Again, we use WebEx, and we were buying this project out when COVID first hit. So we really didn't have the luxury of kind of understanding all these different platforms like Zoom and Teams and things like that. So we were essentially just speaking in WebEx with a slide deck up on the screen. So the bidders would see the slide deck and then they'd hear the voice from behind. And so it wasn't like this where we could actually speak with our faces to that community. So next slide. But again, we achieved some good stuff. We were able to introduce our team. We were able to allow that community to ask questions and get immediate feedback. In this case, we had some large businesses there, but because of the structure of that small business program, second tiers and third tiers applied to that goal calculation. So we were kind of driving to the large businesses, here are small businesses that want to work on this project as well, and try to get those relationships started that way as well. And then again, that importance of that project specific website and trying to drive everyone to that website for current information. And again, the things that we couldn't achieve is that whole face-to-face interaction and networking. Next slide. So here's part of the PowerPoint that we presented on. Next slide. We're able to introduce our team, even though they were just pictures, we still could put a face to the name. Next slide. Able to state what the goals were for the project. Next slide. What agencies are out there for source listing from other agencies that the larger businesses and ourselves could go to try to find small businesses for their specific needs. Next slide. And then that workforce diversity was really prevalent on this job, and we really focused on getting the word out about that percentage goal of 22% female and minorities with the trade portal and our website, just trying to get that word out about the diverse workforce that was required on that project as well. Next slide. And so the interesting thing was during this presentation, we did this probably 8 or 9 times with different bid packages. With that project specific website, we were able to post the entire PowerPoint presentation, an actual video of the outreach event, a list of contractors that attended the outreach event, and then any questions that came up during that event and the answers to that. So at any time, if a small business missed that event, they could always just go to our website and get caught up to speed on the packages, what questions were asked, and what we were trying to communicate out to them. And that is what I have, I believe. Next slide. Yeah. So lesson learned here, you're never going to be able to replace the human element. I think there's a lot of pieces that we learned through this virtual platform that we're going to probably maintain. There's going to be a hybrid per se of this moving forward. Just the amount of people that would attend definitely increased through these virtual outreach, which is nice, but then you kind of have to follow it up with more personal in touch type conversations. So that is what I have.
Thank you very much. I think this was really very helpful to have a better idea of some of the opportunities that we have available to utilize our virtual platforms. Let's see, I've got a couple questions already. One, how do you give them a virtual coffee?
That's a great question. And prior to COVID, it was actually sitting down in a coffee shop and having those conversations in a small group setting. You couldn't, obviously, but it was more important to kind of keep the conversations going, keep connected with that small business community. Because when you're kind of looking at it at a geographic level, you may not have the project today, but a year from now, you may have the project. And knowing that that subcontractor or that small business is out there that can provide that need is what is essential. It's just kind of keeping those connections.
Any other responses on that?
No.
Okay, next question. What tools did you use to track second and third tier spend data?
I can field that question. I know that we're looking at an enterprise system now, which has not been fully developed, but we use the good old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet, which is pretty daunting on the larger projects, but that's the best system we found to date to track those lower tiers.
Any Other responses? Dave or Vanessa?
No, we don't. The only thing that we track are those businesses that attend an outreach event or those businesses that are asking questions that we refer to the large business or to a federal agency. It's like, Dave?
Yeah, that's not something that my office would track. When we do track any subcontracting dollars, it's all through ESRS. So that's mostly done through the contract side.
Yeah, and I'm from the federal side, so it's a lot easier with the first tier. I know that these other operating groups will actually make it part of the pay application process. So it kind of falls back on that first tier's hands to get that information on the second tier, third tiers, flow that up into their pay application. And so that kind of forces them to keep that information current for us.
Thank you. Okay, another question. When do you plan to start bringing suppliers into your facility?
As far as our PTAC goes, our goal is actually to start having in-person training. We actually had an event last year, and of course we had the, virtually and in person. And in person, we ensured that there was the social distancing. People had masks were available. We provided masks. We also provided sanitizer, and we even provided gloves. The rubber disposable gloves if they wanted that. I know this year we had a lot of federal agencies that weren't allowed to travel. And so we had them come in virtually to provide training for events that we hosted. And I think this year it's going to be pretty much the same, both in person and virtually. So there will be a limit as to how many people can attend in person. And of course, all the precautions will be in place. Mask will be provided, sanitizer, and of course gloves, disposable gloves. And then also at our registration, we even had the plastic, like you were at Costco or the grocery store, we had the plastic shields for all of when people were registering, and screens that were up so that people could take a look, behind the screen, what time the next event was going to be held. So that'll probably be till the end of this year. So it's kind of really, we're just kind of following what's happening, through the social, through media, and that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree. It'll probably be a while before we do in-person events. And at Keyport, we're pretty lucky. We have a facility right outside of our gates. So there's never a time where we would have, the contractors or suppliers, as the question said, they wouldn't have to come through gates and go through the security process. We have a big auditorium in our museum that's right outside our gates that we use. Right now, the museum did get in touch with me and said that they're going to start opening up, but they're only allowing like 10 people at a time. So our conferences would be, it's almost better for us to continue to stay virtual because there was more than 10 people that would want to come to our event. So we want to continue to reach out to as many as possible. And right now the virtual platform is the best way. And as Vanessa was saying, we would have to make sure that, gloves, sanitations, everything is available for those folks that come in. So anyway, right now we're going to stick with the virtual until, of course, state guidelines allow us to open it up for more participation.
Thank you. Excellent information. Okay, we've got another question here. How do you coordinate the attendance of suppliers who are competitors?
Well, for the event that I have at Keyport, it's general knowledge. So it's, you know, with our industry day, of course, it's going to give you a background of what Keyport does. And it will give, you know, we have, you know, overarching information as far as what contracts are going to be coming up. So yes, there's probably competitors sitting in the room, maybe even right next to each other. But you know, again, it's more of general information that's being passed. One thing I did want to bring up, you know, our events, even though they're virtual and we don't have that opportunity for companies to develop, you know, partnerships or maybe even some subcontracting partnering, I always want to encourage businesses to come in and use that chat feature in Microsoft Teams or in Zoom just to introduce themselves. I do it all the time. I'll jump in, you know, some of the events that the Navy is putting on, or even on LinkedIn, some of the events that are on LinkedIn, and I'll just do an introduction. Hey, I'm Dave Walls. This is where I work. If you want to, you know, do business with me, please give me a call. So anyway, I want to encourage companies to do that if they come to one of my monthly events or even to an industry day if it's continuing to be on the virtual platform. But anyway, that's at Keyport, you know, again, it's just broad information. So we try not to, you know, we don't want the competitors to feel uneasy in any way.
Yeah, I'd echo the same sentiments Dave just did about the competitors being in the same room. You're going to see that, you know, prior to COVID, where we'd have these in-person outreach. They know each other, and we're going to distribute that attendee list anyways. So not much of a concern there. Another point with the whole outreach, and you know, we've been talking about these breakout rooms that Zoom and Teams offer, and we just haven't had much success, especially with 100 or so type attendees, and then you try to narrow that down to 5 or 10 folks per breakout room. It just seems to never work. So as soon as that technology grows a little better, I can definitely see that these outreach events maybe kind of, even though they may be virtual, maybe more of that networking and kind of one-to-one, face-to-face type conversations as well.
Yeah, Mike, I would definitely agree with you. One of the events that we just hosted, we had 268 businesses for the matchmaking. And what had to happen was a consultant had to call the business ahead of time to make sure that they knew when they were going to be meeting, you know, just to coordinate the whole thing. And you're right, if you have, you know, over 100, it's a big task, you know, to do that, and especially with limited time. So I think that's one of the things that everybody is trying to master right now, you know, how to do the matchmaking.
Thank you. Great answers. Great idea too, Dave. I actually want to pick up on that one because as those of you who have attended in person know, we usually, you know, we're all sitting around different tables and we have lunch together, we have breakfast together, sometimes we even have dinner together. So there's lots of opportunities for networking and communicating and finding out, you know, who might be a good person to work with or to ask questions of. And since we don't really have that exact setting this time, I'm going to steal Dave's idea. I think in the chat box, if you would like to give your own brief introduction and how to contact you, I think that would really be beneficial. Not required, but if you're interested, I think that would be a great use of the chat box. So I'm just going to leave it open there. You're welcome to take it if you want. Let's see here. We've got a couple comments that came in. Let's see, the project outreach and community partnership program sounds great. And another one, I think this was probably in response to the virtual coffee, is ask participants to bring their favorite morning beverage and join the conversation until we meet again in person. Okay. I'm going to ask if anyone has any additional questions. As we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I don't know that too many people would really complain if you get a little bit of time back today. Let's see, looks like we'll probably give you guys about a half hour back. If there aren't any more questions, oh, I see someone, Ms. Stephanie Caldwell already jumped into the chat box. Great idea. Oh, and let's see, actually, it looks like there's a couple others. Jackie Hacker did too. So I'm going to go ahead and call it that we are done with the actual training part for today. However, if you want to stay on and utilize the chat box, you're more than welcome to. And we will plan to meet up again tomorrow morning and have another day of outstanding training. We've got some great things in store for you. Again, I want to thank everyone for participating today and for joining us. It is definitely a little different doing it all virtually, but we look forward to when we can do it in person again. Thank you to everyone for your participation, and we will see you in the morning, or we'll see you in the chat box. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Melinda, you still there?
I am.
Let me see your face.
Oh, here. Oh, there we go.
How are you?
Can you see me now?
Hi, Sam. Hi, Melinda. Yeah, I miss you guys.